Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us again at this second meeting of the Committee on Administration and Management. I'm getting my committees confused. Andy said his regrets he's traveling today and will not be able to attend, but he thanks everyone for your hard work so far and continued work on this project. We're here, of course, to discuss identifying and reducing burdens in administrative processes. Before I hand it over to Eloise, I'm just going to quickly call two roles. The first role will be the names of committee members and alternates. After each name is called, the person should stay here so we can make sure our mics are working. Eloise.
Present.
Sam Bagenstos.
I am here.
And Bernard Bell.
Present.
Amy Bunk.
Here.
Bill Funk.
Here.
Conway Rangers is alternate for Claire Green.
Here.
John Kamensky.
Here.
Mike Lazaja as alternate for Bert Kapler. Okay, he just emailed me a few minutes ago, so he should be joining us shortly. Aaron Nielsen. And Jim Tozy. Jim, I think you're on mute. Nope, there, all right. The second role will be the names of ACUS members who are not on the committee and their alternates, as well as our consultants. After each name is called, the person should stay here so we can make sure your mics are working. I will not be calling the names of members of the public who do not have speaking privileges. So if you don't hear your name called, you should write in the chat if you would like to speak, and Eloise will proceed accordingly.
Did you lock in Lauren Belmar beforehand? I missed your call earlier.
Oh, great. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Here.
Pam,
Here.
hi, thanks, Pam. Don Moynihan.
Here.
Amy Widman.
Here.
Matt Weiner. You were here a second ago, Matt.
He came on twice. I think he might be having some connection difficulties. It looked like he was fiddling with two different devices. So maybe he's trying to.
Well, hopefully he'll sort that out. That's a reminder, if anybody has any technical difficulties, please get in touch with me and I will try to assist you as best I can. Steph Cason.
Hi, this is Steph. I'm here. I also want to let you know I've got a sick kiddo home today, so my attention may be a little bit divided, but I'll do my best to be present.
No, so sorry to hear that. Well, hopefully it's a quick one. All right. Is there any other members of ACUS whose name I did not call?
Matt just jumped on, so maybe you can grab him.
Oh, hi, Matt. All right, I will hand it over to
Bridget?
you.
Do you see Bridget's hand? Bridget Dooling?
Hi, Bridget. Did I not call your name?
Yeah, senior fellow. Hello, everybody.
Hi, thank you. Okay, Eloise, it's all yours.
Great. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back for round two. I'm really happy to see you. I have the following script to read to you as before. Please note that only ACUS members, including government members and their designated alternates, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels, whether or not on the committee, and their designated alternates have full speaking privileges, meaning if you're a non-ACUS member and you wish to speak, please write in the chat if you'd like to be recognized. To avoid background noise, I'll ask everybody to keep the microphone on mute and then either use Zoom's hand raise feature or note in the chat if you'd like to speak, and I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself. Please then remute yourself when you're done. Ideally, I'll ask everybody to use a webcam if possible. With respect to attendees other than ACUS members and alternates, participation requires the unanimous consent of the committee members. Time permitting, I'll consider calling on such attendees at appropriate points and will presume that committee members consent absent their raising an objection. So again, if such participant would like to speak, please just indicate in the chat feature that you would like to speak, or by using the hand raise feature and wait until I call on you. For everybody, please remember to use the chat function only to indicate that you'd like to speak. or for committee members and their alternates to vote when asked. So please don't hold sidebar discussions or put substantive comments in the chat feature. It really helps us stay focused on only the conversation that we're having. If you can just note in the chat, not substance, but just that you want to be recognized. And then as for voting, only members of this committee, including government members and their designated alternates, public members, senior fellows, liaison representatives, and special counsels have a vote. Please don't vote unless you're a member of the committee, and we have a list of committee members in case you are unsure. So those are all the preliminaries. With that, I think I will ask Ben to share his screen with the recommendation as it stands, and we'll take it from there. So we made really excellent progress last time, and this time, in addition to the recommendations with some edits that we had before, we also have the preamble draft. So what I'd like to do today is start by cleaning up just a couple of kind of leftover comments that are in the margins from the recommendations that we looked at last time. And then my hope is that we can finish up the recommendations themselves this time, which would then leave our third meeting to circle back and work through the preamble. Of course, if we get through the preamble today, that would be a delight. But that's my agenda for how we begin. So Ben, if you could take us to the first comment in the recommendations that we looked at last time, that would be great. So I think go up a little bit, because we had one or two cleanup things that I just want to do. So we had a new comment. So in recommendation 5, in the burden identification strategies, Bernard Bell offered a comment back on this, the disproportionate burden question that we spent a long time on last time. So Bernard, for background, I think the bulk of this conversation might have happened when you left to go teach in the interim. So I think the language that we ended up spending a long time on this and decided not to call out individual groups. But I wanted to, before we move on from this, I wanted to take a look at the additional kind of the way you have recommended breaking up the language into 2 different sentences. So if everybody could just focus their attention on the proposed edits here, that would be great. Bernard, I don't know if you want to explain them or if you are satisfied with my introduction of them. Feel free to just be recognized now.
Sure, I'll just say briefly what motivates the comment that we're focusing on is that there may be groups facing disproportionate, there may be different groups facing disproportionate burdens depending on the agency and the program, and it seemed to make sense to ask agencies to identify groups facing disproportionate burdens, and then pay particular consideration to including those groups in their consultation effort. So that's
go ahead.
thrust of it. I'm done. That's the thrust of it. I'm done. Thank you.
Perfect. So it's almost like a 1-2. You just want to make sure that individual agencies spend time identifying who the groups might be, and they might vary depending on what the program is, what the agency is, and then spend some time thinking about consulting those individuals. Okay, does anybody have any comments that they would like to make on this new proposed language?
Warren Belmar.
Well, Warren, I'll call on you in 1 minute. Steph's hand was up first. Go ahead, Steph.
Sorry, Warren, quick on the draft. I was just wondering if before the comment, it should be programs to reflect a broader idea than just benefits.
Sorry, say again, where in line, is it line 87?
Yes, in line 87, if that benefit should be programs.
In accessing agency programs. Yes, I think that's right. And I think that better captures what Bernard is going for here. Okay, thanks for that, Steph. Warren, you're recognized.
Thank you. I've got to learn how to find the raise your hand button because.
Do you know where the chat is? Because that's actually also fine. If you can click the chat and you just write calling me or please recognize me or something like that.
We'll-
I'll have
we'll
an easy
do it.
time doing that.
Sooner or
Okay.
later, I'll find the way to raise my hand. I would not add that sentence. I think we're asking the agency to be too involved. I'm always bothered by telling some group that they are disadvantaged and need extra help. We're going to try to catch everybody. And if you have the agencies listing one, then it should have been 3, or it should have been 5, it should have been 6, or how do they decide which ones fit the group? What are the standards? Is it just personal impressions as to which group should be figured out? What we've got here is that they should make sure that they try to find out who's hurt, and then we have a list of things that they should do called client outreach, all the other activities. So putting in this burden on the agencies to do something that I don't know how they judge which groups face disproportionate burdens and which ones don't. So I would delete the sentence.
Warren, let me try to understand whether is the language that you're particularly objecting to groups. If we used another word like identify those who may face disproportionate burdens or something like that. I'm trying to understand. I remember from last time you were really concerned about the word group, and I'm wondering if we can capture part of what Bernard's concern is without kind of triggering the language that you object to.
Could you repeat the way you would
Sure.
read the sentence?
Sure. So the language, the suggestion would be, so I'm in line 86, in seeking to do so, agencies should identify those who may face disproportionate burdens.
Should try to.
Yeah, sure. Should try to identify those who may face. That would be another way of capturing it. And then we'd need a parallel change in line 88. Pay particular attention to.
I don't think we need that because that catches the first part of the sentence.
So you would cut the sentence after programs. You would just delete the and pay. Okay, Bernard, would that sort of fit with the threat? I should also say we had like a super long, we almost came to a vote. We ended up reaching consensus. It was maybe a 30-minute conversation. So I don't really want to reopen the whole like macro version of the conversation, but I'm wondering, Bernard, if this addition would help satisfy some of the concerns in your comment.
Yeah, I'm fine with most of it. The try to and those who may face is fine. I guess I'm a little hesitant about deleting the and pay particular attention to including those groups in their consultation efforts.
So what if we add, could we do a 1-2 at line 86, 87 that says, and Warren, listen to this, because I think I'm trying to kind of balance here. So in seeking to do so, agencies should try to identify and consult with those who may face.
Okay. I just don't want to point to a group and say
Great.
people with
Great.
disabilities or
Great. No, I
disabilities.
I remember that from last time. So that, but if we can sort of capture the thrust, the goal of Bernard's comments without kind of getting to the language that you, and there were a number of others on the call who didn't like the group language last time, then this may be a way around it. Okay, does anybody else want to offer? It sounds like
it just captures the whole idea of the recommendations themselves. Isn't that what we're doing in all the recommendations?
Right, exactly. And of course, what we're trying to do is take big ideas and break them down into actionable steps, of course. So there's a lot to sort of be balancing here. But it sounds like we have basic buy-in from both Warren and Bernard. And so I'm wondering if folks are comfortable with the language that we have on the screen. If you want to say anything, please raise your hand. And if not, we'll move on to the next bit. So I'll just pause for a moment. Great. I think we've reached consensus here. Thank you both for your really helpful input. So let's now go, we have a little bit of cleanup to do still on recommendation 7, line 100. Ben, I think this was a committee on style point. Could you just tell us what you did here, what we did here?
Yeah, I think that the original language, it was a little bit unclear potentially about the reason why we're going to have agencies trace the legal or operational source of the identified burdens. And so this is really just kind of a minor edit to clarify that the purpose of that is to determine what is within agencies' ability to reduce, as opposed to something that's statutory that they don't have the ability to
Great.
change.
Thanks for clarifying that. And remember, we moved federal or state level at the bottom, everybody last time in the committee itself, so that we could be capturing, you know, the two different tiers. Bernard.
Just quick suggestion, instead of ability, would authority be more appropriate?
Authority, I think, is more appropriate. Yes, thank you. Exactly what we were going for. Any other comments? Great. Okay, so the last comment that we have floating around here.
And just recall, this one is going to be addressed in a later recommendation, so we can
Exactly.
ignore that. So I apologize. I didn't remember.
Okay, great. No, that's fine. So this is a comment from John Kamensky about cumulative burden, but John, I'll sort of call on you to start that when we get to that section below, but we are not just there yet. Then we have just a couple of these edits here in line. In recommendation 10, we had a couple of kind of modifications that we said we'd come back to. So if everybody wants to just take a quick look here. I think actually in line B, I'm not myself totally thrilled with allow, so it's line 119, allow individuals to use universal logins used by government agencies. I'm not exactly sure how the double use kind of bothers me. That is a committee on style thing though, so we could just circle back to that unless anybody wants to offer anything now. I'm just pausing for a moment to see if anybody wants to come in on that. If not, we'll massage that later. Okay, great. So I think we're then ready to start fresh at number 11, recommendation 11. So actually, Ben, before we do that, can you just go up one? I want to just get us all set in our head to where the title is. I want to just refresh everybody's recollection. So this is in the title of, we're no longer in burden identification strategies. Now we're in burden reduction strategies. We worked our way through 9 and 10 before, and now we're going to be at number 11. So thanks, Ben, if you could scroll back down to number 11. And we have agencies should reduce steps individuals must take to receive benefits or services by using existing information to determine program eligibility or to pre-populate enrollment forms where permitted by law, or by automatically selecting the most beneficial program options for individuals unless they decide to opt out. So let's talk about this in substance, as well as if anybody has any language to suggest. And I just want to flag that we did talk at our last meeting about whether we wanted to talk about data sharing agreements in any way, and we deferred that substantive conversation for today. So that's part of what I'm hoping we can talk through today. So what are people's thoughts about recommendation 11? I'll look for hands or a reference in the chat that you want to be recognized. Okay, I don't see anybody, and I know that I am not an expert in data sharing agreements. So if we want to include anything on data sharing agreements or reference it in any way, we definitely need somebody to provide some context for that. I don't recall offhand how that comment, who raised that comment or how that comment came up, but we need to know a little bit more about it if we want to try to think about adding something here. Okay, is anybody from an agency here who wants to express any? Okay, thank you, John. Go ahead, you're recognized.
This would be, for example, the IRS being able to share data with federal student aid about eligibility for student aid benefits. Similarly, agencies sharing information that's needed for eligibility for SNAP or other programs as well. So this is allowing the agencies to share that data rather than individuals having to provide it on their application forms.
Great. And so I guess the question is whether we specifically need to reference any authority or kind of memorandums of understanding or something like that in order to capture that. So I'll call in Bridget, and then actually I'll call in Bridget and Sam, and then Don and Pam and Amy, if you want to comment in some way, I'll recognize you. Bridget.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I think it's about modifying the phrase using existing information, because an agency would only have so much, and the idea is via a data sharing agreement, you might be able to use existing information, that is outside of the agency, but still held by the government. So I think that's the phrase that we'd be looking to modify here, and that's as far as I can get you.
Got it. So you would suggest, subject to further knowledgeable input, something like by using information held elsewhere in the government via a data sharing agreement?
That's as far as I can get you. Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. So pin in that. Sam.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a degree of detail that we're just not going to want to get into here. And so where permitted by law is going to be kind of crucial. There are a lot of legal restrictions on data sharing. I think we could respond to Bridget's suggestion by saying something like using information in the government's possession, because it wouldn't necessarily be in some other agency's possession. It could be in this agency's possession as
Great.
well. And then where permitted by law, I would take as incorporating all the limitations on data sharing. And there are a lot, and they come from a lot of different places. So we're not going to be able to specify any of that.
Great. And would you recommend keeping the where permitted by law where it is in the sentence? So in other words, it would still follow to pre-populate enrollment forms, or would it come before?
Well,
I think where
yeah.
permitted by law might have to cover all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to cover all of it. Agents, you could begin the sentence with where permitted by law, agencies should, and then that would solve that problem. I think it's okay where it is, because I think it is the using information to determine program eligibility or pre-populate. Well, no, I think actually if you're creating an opt-out for the most beneficial program option, that might
That also probably has to
be
be.
limited by law in certain circumstances. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. Ben, I see you're working on cutting and pasting. So I'm gonna pause for a minute to let you do that while I
can put it in the front or the end?
I would put it at the end, and then let's just take a look at it. So where permitted by law. It is the case that someone at plenary will say all of our recommendations are always subject to where permitted by law. And yet I think it's actually doing particular work here. So I would feel comfortable explaining that on the floor of the plenary. So Ben, you've got that. I thought we were doing it at the beginning. And then Don, Amy, Pam, if you want to comment on any of this as we're modifying it, I'll pause for a minute to recognize you.
I mean, I think our spirit of communication was using data is good. Data sharing is a tool to facilitate that, and there should be more of it. Maybe we don't get into it here, but it does seem to be quite time consuming, even when allowed by law, to structure these data sharing agreements, but that may be more detailed than we want to tackle.
I think my instinct would be to leave it at this high level of generality, because I don't know that this is a recommendation on how to make data sharing agreements more effective. That's maybe for down the line. So there's one more thing, Ben, for you to edit out, which is existing information now needs to be deleted, because I think you've I think I saw your hand go up and down, but maybe you were just getting online to say that. Okay, so are we comfortable with this recommendation as it stands now? I'll pause for a moment to let folks take a look at it. Great, let's move to 12. And so here we have some substantive comments that we need to address, both from last time and this time, but we just never got here last time. So let's both look at the recommendation, and then I don't think Tobias is here. Is he here? I didn't see him on the screen. Can somebody from ACUS remind me where he's coming from? Liaison representative from, is he an alternate here?
Toby is not here today, and he is a liaison from the Executive Office of the President.
Okay, So let me just say, sort of the substance of number 12 is as it reads on the screen. So I'm interested in comments about just the substance as it reads on the screen, but then we also have this comment about is easier or sort of a relative standard the right metric here. Bernard, I remember that you had I think you had a comment in response to this that was circulated. So maybe if Ben, this idea about easier comparative wants to, if Ben can get that up on the screen. Thank you, Ben. And then Bernard, I don't know if you want to explain your input here. That would be helpful.
Sure. I mean, it's a little odd to do so because I'm really responding to.
I know, right? So,
but essentially, the basic initial comment was we're using a lot of relative terms, and there may be circumstances in which the agency programs are already very accessible, and so then to urge agencies to make them more accessible seemed like not a good idea. And basically my response to that is to put this in context where throughout this recommendation, we really talk about identifying burdens and then reducing them. And so if you've identified a burden initially, then it makes sense to talk about reducing the burden by making things easier, a relative term. And there's a couple other terms he mentions that also make sense once you take into account that this is part of a two-step process in which the agency has already identified a burden. If it has identified no burden, then it has no obligation to make things easier. So that was basically the thrust of
great. Great, that's great. And so then remember at the beginning of our conversation when I asked Ben to scroll back up to the header that we were in, and we're in the header on reducing burdens, which is different from the header we were talking about last time about identifying burdens. That sort of is a vivid illustration of exactly what Bernard is talking about. Okay, so where are folks on this? Do folks want to comment on either the overall recommendation number 12 or offer some thoughts, or if everybody's comfortable, given what Bernard has said with the easier, the relative language, then that's just fine. But the floor is open for anybody who wants to make a comment on any aspect of number 12.
Do I have
Bill.
my hand up?
Warren, your hand is not up, and I'm going to take a minute to show you how to get your hand up.
I just did it. I thought it shows.
No, okay, sure. You got your thumbs up. I will recognize you, Warren, and then I'll call on you, Bill.
Rather than just using the word easier, indicating that it's not as easy as possible already, I'd change easier to as easy as possible to find. And that's a general admonition to everybody rather than indicating some are deficient at the moment.
Great, and that's a suggestion for almost an objective standard. Okay, thank you for that, Warren. Bill, have you been swiped yet again of your comments? Bill Funk? Okay, seems like possibly Bill was going to be making that comment. Yes, okay, Bill, I'm finding, great, perfect. I'm finding you on the screen and I see you're sort of nodding at your desk there. So that's great, thank you for that. Okay, so with this modification, any other comments on this? Wonderful, well, let's move to number 13. So here, I don't think, do we have any comments? I don't think we have a comment. So we just have number 13 to look at. So this is the plain language and where possible, where appropriate and feasible, multiple languages. Any comments on this recommendation? Pam, go ahead.
I may have missed this, but it's hitting me. The one thing about the prior comment I'm sorry, I can't see on my screen, the person who is not here, he did make a comment about this seeming like these recommendations. I think he meant, so this is what I was confused about. I can't tell what's linking to what, but to 13 was like a one-time thing. And he was sort of saying, is this an ongoing recommendation versus a one-time thing? And
I think that was in response to the easier language, you know, how long does this obligation last?
yeah, so I'm sorry though, which number would that be relevant to?
I think that is where we just were in number 12. I think he then
Okay.
was noting that there's a bunch of other places where
As well.
we use that. Yeah, yeah. So do you want to go back to that? Do you have a
Well,
comment about
I'm actually, I just want to make sure, because to me, I was sort of surprised that to me, it seems like this is, the language was intended and I assume this meant an ongoing obligation. I guess I'm just wondering, like, that is the intent, which is that, like, no, it's not a one-time thing. Like, programs change all the time. You're not like going to do this once and be done with it. So that did sort of hit me a little bit as like, oh, might people actually read it that way? It may be a non-issue, but I did just want to make sure I didn't miss that.
So, and then the question would be whether we need to actually add like to the principles above or something like that, or maybe this is just preamble language to the, you know, that this is an ongoing. Is that like this is an
either? It's
ongoing
fine
obligation?
with me.
Okay, so let's actually just pause here for a second. Do people think that we need to say something about whether this is a one-time obligation or an ongoing obligation? And if so, is everybody in agreement, as Pam, one of the consultants, is suggesting, that it is an ongoing obligation? Do we need to spell that out more clearly, or do people not agree with the basic premise? Bridget.
I think it's pretty clear that it's an ongoing recommendation. I mean, ACUS can't require anything. So I think to the extent it's making recommendations, it's doing so in an ongoing way.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to offer? If not, then I think we're probably okay with just leaving things where we are, subject to, you know, some question from the floor to confirm that. Okay. At which point I can say that we had this conversation and that is our intent. So let's go back to 13, which is the language suggestion. Are there any comments about 13? Bill.
I hesitate to raise this, but whenever I see this about multiple languages, I wonder, how is somebody supposed to address either the appropriateness or the necessity for multiple languages and which languages to be involved? I mean, I have to say I'm motivated by receiving under my medical insurance 2 pages of languages that not only can I not read, can't even read the letters because they're Farsi or Chinese or Japanese or something I don't recognize at all. And I mean, it would be, if I were an agency, I'd throw up my hands at that unless we'd already done it. Just said, is there some sort of government-wide number of languages that you're supposed to use? And if so, it would be nice if we could tell them to use that, all right? And if not, it would seem to me nice, it would be really good help if we could give them some guidance as to on what basis they should make the decision between one language or another. I mean, it's contextual, but I see somebody else's hand up. Well, maybe Sam has an answer to this. I hope so, because it just sort of irks me. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Sam.
Well, I think there are existing resources within the federal government that we can point to. I mean, I will, this is probably an inappropriate use of the chat, but what the hell, I can't actually do it, so don't worry. I was going to paste into the chat the DOJ language access plan that they issued in August, but every agency is required to have a language access plan in the federal government, which requires it to identify the languages that are necessary to translate things into, and then have a plan for making sure that things are available in those languages. So this won't be a particularly novel requirement or expectation on them. And that's why, Bill, you get the flyers with all that. Or when I went to the DMV a couple of weeks ago and they had, multiple languages available, it's because there are already these pre-existing mandates. I think nodding to that is a good idea if there's like a thank you very much, Bridget. If there's a committee on style recommendation about like pointing to some specific, language access plan or the executive order requiring language access plans, that might be a thing to do, but I don't think it's going to be that hard to process.
Okay, that's great. And so just to be clear, the link that Bridget provided is you think, Sam, that's the link with the formal, like link to executive order mandate or link to,
That link has every agency language access plan.
okay, great. So Ben, if you could then put a comment here that the Committee on Style will add a citation to that. Do we want to actually have a sentence though that sort of gestures towards the fact that we're referring to pre-existing legal requirement? Because I think that sentence would not be for the Committee on Style to add. Sam, do you want to take a stab at suggesting something for 13?
I mean, I don't know whether I could. I mean, in the sense that I'm now just trying to implement what you've said is the goal here. I don't know that I necessarily think it's necessary, but so should provide information in plain language and where appropriate and feasible in multiple languages. Pursuant to Executive Order 13166 or something like that.
I put that at the end of the sentence rather than the middle. But
Well,
I
but
think
plain
that's-
language, but the problem is you have to put it next to multiple languages because plain language is not what the executive order is about. It's only about multiple.
And plain language also has its own, I think, even statutory, and there's also ACUS, several ACUS recommendations, I think. Okay, I'll call on Steph now.
I was just going to suggest that we add this detail in the preamble as opposed to the recommendation. I think it's helpful and informative, but it's sort of bogging down the simple recommendation language. So,
would people be comfortable if we do it that way? If in the preamble, because that also in the preamble tends to be where we have footnotes and legal references and things like that. Would people be comfortable with that? Okay, I see it. See a thumbs up. I'm scrolling through to see if I can see nodding or anything from disembodied Zoom voices. Hello, hello. You're alive. Okay, great. I see some more thumbs up. Okay, so if you want to object, please raise your hand. I also got a private chat from Matt of ACUS saying that the adjudication committee approved some specific language on basically exactly this, that possibly we could just import into our preamble in a similar way. Matt, does that capture basically the thrust of what you were trying to share with me?
I think so, yeah. The adjudication committee on a similar issue of when material should be presented in other languages for people that frequently come before their agency program. We ended up stealing language from the FAQ for the LEP.gov
Perfect.
area. So take a look at it and see if it might be able to be
That's great. So then I will treat this as a Committee on Style point. So take out, Ben, if you could take out pursuant to EO here. Yeah, I like your comment there. So we'll add comment to language access plans in the preamble but I just want to make sure that we capture also the language that Matt will send from the adjudication committee, which also has the advantage of presenting to the plenary kind of parallel stuff coming out of ACUS committees. So thanks for that. Okay, so Ben, I'll let you capturing that? So you can just write like plus adjudication committee memo or something, language plus adjudication committee memo. Great. So anything else on 13 before we leave it? Great, so let's go to 14. So this captures, so agencies should increase the availability of assistance for individuals interacting with their programs. And then we call out, or the draft recommendation calls out a number of possibilities. And so Bernard, can I ask you to say a little bit about the suggestion that you, actually, I think it's a couple of suggestions that you offered here.
Right, so you want me to do one and then the other? So I was thinking of first doing the legal aid organizations. And
Sure. Go ahead and do the legal aid organizations.
Okay, so here in 14A, line 136, 137, just seems to me that there are more organizations that are providing assistance to individuals in interacting with government programs than legal aid organizations. So there's a variety of pro bono organizations. In fact, there are law firms that have pro bono components. There are not a lot, but increasingly low bono services where it's not free, but the charges are reduced, and they really are catering to individuals of some but limited means. So I think that a broader reference should be made here to all organizations that are assisting people in this way.
Great, thanks for that explanation. Ben, quick typo, I think there's a double space between others and who. Any substantive comments on 14A with Bernard's modification? Okay, let's go to 14B. And Bernard, again, I'll ask you to comment.
Okay, well, thank you. So here I don't have a specific suggestion, but I made the comment to set out a general principle or something I'm a little bit concerned about, which is I think it's great to have a way for individuals to receive assistance from non-lawyers or from non-lawyer representatives. But I think concomitant with that, the agencies need to be careful to police in some way non-lawyer representatives so that they don't do harm to the people who they are trying to help. And that may be by, having a robust means of taking complaints and pursuing them. May mean that the personnel with whom the representatives are interacting have to be conscious of making sure that if something is problematic in that representation or problematic with a particular representative, that they refer those for some sort of examination by people who have a responsibility of making sure non-lawyer representatives are competent, honest, and not harming the people who they're trying to whose interests they are trying to further. So that was the basic point.
That's great. Thanks for flagging that point. My recollection, Bill, I was almost going to cold call you to talk about what I imagine you're going to talk about. Bill, mind reading?
Probably. Bernard, you're probably not aware that ACA's adopted recommendation 2021-9 dealing with the conduct before agency adjudications, and there's an ongoing effort to draft model rules of representative conduct, which deal with both lawyers and non-lawyers. And so it does address, it doesn't really address very much the initial accrediting, but after the accreditation, the idea of providing a means and process for making complaints and assuring that people are getting adequate representation in the proceeding is covered. So I think most of that is already there. Whether or not we should, again, in the preamble, make a reference to that earlier recommendation.
I don't remember if it's in the preamble right now, and I don't think we should go up to check now, but I think we should flag for discussion when we get to the preamble that we should definitely be citing that information there. So Bernard, do you think that satisfies the concern you're raising?
It may, and I was not aware.
Yeah, I feel like we should send you the the recommendation. Maybe you could look at it when we get to the preamble.
Yeah, I mean, I knew this was being worked on, but I actually thought it was focusing more on lawyers than non-lawyers. So I mean, it seems to me it might not be a bad idea to have some reference here to the need for agencies to have some system of policing non-lawyer representative conduct.
So then it's not just
consistent with-
accrediting that you, so it's almost like you know, establish rules to accredit, comma, oversee, comma, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I
Something
mean,
like
some
that.
nod
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
the need to do some oversight, and then a reference to the other ACRES project and the results of that would be fine, either here, which it might be easy to do, or in the preamble. So you can
Great.
try it in the preamble, see if that works, if people are comfortable with that, and then if that doesn't work, then maybe provide a citation to the ACRES recommendation here.
okay, thanks for that, Bernard. I'm going to recognize Jim, and then absent objection, I will call on Ally and Green. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, I was just wondering what the database was for that concern. My concern, I used to spend a lot of time, not every once in a while, going to helping certain groups when they were applying for permits. And my view was, the problem was I didn't see anyone helping them. It wasn't a problem of misrepresentation. The big problem was there were not enough people that even weren't attorneys that had some background that could help them. So I have no problems with that recommendation. But I think the big problem is that I saw when I stood in those lines and helped people that couldn't read through 25 pages of the Federal Register to help, I saw the problem was just wasn't anyone there, competent or not. And the people were completely in the woods about this. So I agree with that, but I really think the bigger problem is, it's somewhat ought to look at it, there's hardly anyone getting out there and helping them. Thank you.
So Jim, just to make sure I understand, is your suggestion that we add something that
No,
agency should, so you're just commenting that this is just a small
I'm saying
piece
that
of
the people
okay.
on this group seem to be, in my mind, maybe preoccupied with not the biggest problem. My problem is that when I saw the people in lines, even in trying to get food stamps sometime, they would take any kind of help. They couldn't read, some of them couldn't read the thing. And the issue was, you didn't have a law degree, is they just needed help. So I'm not taking any exception with it. But I think if somebody in this group, and all attorneys, they might want to equally look at the fact that there isn't any representation, how imperfect. I even the other day, 2 months ago, I went to get a driver's license renewal. And the poor person behind me couldn't even get close to all that detail. So I think that's a problem in the long run. The lawyer group should work on. In addition to that, I have no problem with the thing as written.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So I'll call on Ally and then I'll go back to Bernard.
Thank you, Eloise. My name is Ally Young Green. I'm with the Department of Justice Office for Access to Justice. And as some of my colleagues at ACUS knows, I'm also leading the Legal Aid Interagency Roundtable, which is an interagency effort that many of the agencies who are members to ACUS are also participating. And I was interested in chiming here, if I may, because this is an issue that we have been looking at. And one question I have of this particular provision is, I think it's a great recommendation, but specifically a question about using the word accrediting, established rules to credit non-lawyer representatives, and that is to recognize that a lot of the programs, the federal programs that allow for a non-lawyer representation don't actually require accreditation or recognition, which is often seen as like licensing or setting up some level of process that may require passing an exam or doing regular ongoing continuing education. So I think there's a consideration of using a different term, or it could be to accredit or like appropriately regulate the conduct of, so that we are not unintentionally increasing the burden that's involved in supporting the use of non-lawyers in this process.
Thanks, Ali. Did you finish? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yep, I'm done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that really helpful intervention. And I think I also remember that Bill Funk, when he reminded us about the previous ACUS recommendation, said that that a credit wasn't even in the language there. So I wonder if as I am calling on Bernard, if one of the ACUS Powerhouse people, staff members, could look for the recommendation that Bill Funk was referring to and pull out for us there's probably like a list of 3 verbs or something in that recommendation that says what it's doing. And I'm wondering if we could just pull from that list of verbs. So Matt, if you could kind of manage can you assign this to somebody who's there's a lot of ACUS people here. Could we just sort of be looking for that behind the scenes while I recognize Bernard, and then Bill Funk, I'll call on you again. Go ahead, Bernard.
Yeah, just very briefly, I just want to recognize Jim Tozzi's comment. And my comment is not made to suggest that the bigger problem is inadequate representation. And in fact, I applaud this suggestion or this proposal to expand the ability for people to get representation, both legal and non-legal. It just seemed to me as part of that, we need to at least acknowledge the potential problem. So I think both can be done. And so I don't disagree with you, Jim, on what the more significant problem is. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate that. So I'll call on Bill, and then Warren, I think I might have seen you raising your hand again. So I'll call on you after I call on Bill Funk. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, first, there's just the sort of drafting issue. It should be establishing rules rather than establish rules.
Yes, thank you.
But I was even wondering whether or not we should just start with accrediting. In other words, rather than establishing rules, say accrediting and overseeing non-lawyer representatives who may practice before the agency. And then I was going to add on a regular basis. That is, to make a distinction between the organizations that actually do have non-lawyer representatives, like the veterans assistance groups, and the sort of ad hoc person, because in the recommendation, the ACUS recommendation on conduct before and adjudicating, it's a recognition that it might be just a relative who's doing it, all right, who's not a lawyer and isn't the part of some, is the person that Jim Tozzi's talking about, somebody who can do the reading. And so I just wondered, because efforts could include, it's not exclusive, all right, but if you're going to have groups that regularly represent somebody, then the idea of accrediting the group seems to me a reasonable thing. So I'd rewrite it to say accrediting and overseeing non-lawyer representatives who may practice before the agency on a regular basis.
Okay, thanks for that, Ben. Let's try that out. Warren, I'm going to call on you because I think you wish to be recognized. Is that right?
That is right. I just was looking at C while we were looking at B, and B.
Well, I don't want to talk about C yet, unless it's going to help us think about B.
It does, in that there
Okay.
we're about assistance, and here we're talking in B about representation. Do we mean to draw a distance there? Is that what Bill Funk is talking about? Assistance from people who aren't before the agency on a regular basis, as opposed to representation by those people?
Bill?
I'm distinguishing between them, and B would sort of refer to those people who regularly represent people, and C would be the ones who don't, the family and friends. So it's a distinction between those types of groups. And so I think B and C
Go together.
Work together.
What would the assistance be that family members could make if they weren't representing the individual?
Bill, did you want to respond?
Help. I mean, they could be representing. I mean, if we want to say that, but allowing individuals such as family.
What do we think they're going to do, or what are we allowing them to do?
Okay, so I'm gonna take that as a question, Warren, and Bill, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot there. I was just sort of responding to your previous thing, and I see that we have 2 hands up from our consultants, and so I will call on first Pam and then Amy to help answer this question that we have on the table. So Pam, go ahead.
So I'll answer, yeah, so families actually provide a ton of assistance already. Pretty much for our largest programs like Medicaid, any disability program, families do a ton of work. Actually Medicare as well, when people enroll, there's actually whole outreach programs pushing children to help elderly parents enroll in Medicare, like make plan choices. So that's like a huge thing that kind of already happens. So that's sort of how it happens. I don't want to get into the discussion of that point, but I will say I probably want to come back to that point when we get there. But that's the answer to the question.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Amy?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, the spirit here was to really expand the possibilities for representation beyond legal representation. And so I just also wanted to, as Matt is having someone check the word accrediting, because I do want to make sure that that word doesn't create more of a hurdle rather than less of a hurdle. I also want to check in, because I know there's been some talk about the language non-lawyer representative and whether there's a way to, I don't know if the model rules folks have come to a determination about terminology, about what to call these representatives who do not have law degrees, but we may want to keep consistency with what's going on that track.
Thanks for that. So yeah, my general hope here would be that whatever language we use in B would be as consistent as possible with something that a committee already spent, that already made it through plenary. So Matt, without putting you on the spot, since I assigned you a task to assign to somebody, do you have an answer for what the verbs are and how to kind of make sure that we're using this to expand and not contract?
Yes, so I do. And unfortunately, yes, as far as I can tell, recommendation 2021-9 does not use the word accredited. It simply states that agent, where is it? With respect to non-attorneys, agencies should determine what rules, if any, they will establish to govern who can practice before the agencies. So there's the idea that agencies should be establishing some sort of way to separate people who have the required expertise with the agency, but not a particularly good term such as accrediting or qualifying or something like that. That said,
okay.
We have seen qualified non-lawyers to represent before the agency used before, and I could look in the model rules
as a verb. Just Matt, just to make sure I understand what you're saying before I call in Jim and Bill, you're saying qualify, like that would be the verb that agencies would do, qualifying
Jeremy
and
is shaking his
overseeing.
head, no?
Sorry, say again.
I said I caught Jeremy shaking his head, so I think that's
Yeah, okay. I'm going to call skipping lines. Sorry, folks, but I'm going to call on Jeremy first because I think he might have the previous ACUS language.
I would just say something like allowing qualified non-lawyer representatives. We'll work on that term, but basically allowing qualified, and it leaves it to the agency to determine in a case by case.
So allowing and overseeing qualified non-lawyer representatives. Let's get that language up there. Yeah. And then I'll call on Jim and Bill in 1 minute, but I want to let Ben do this. Yeah, so if you can then cut and paste that, allowing and overseeing to the beginning of B. And then delete the accrediting and overseeing non-lawyer representatives there. Allowing and overseeing qualified non-lawyer representatives who may practice no longer makes sense.
You probably want things like allowing and overseeing qualified non-lawyers to represent parties before the agency.
Yeah,
something like that.
Non-lawyers to represent. That's great. Do we want to say individuals rather than parties? Because it's not, adversarial. Not necessarily adversarial. Okay, all right. So with that, and then we'll to represent individuals. So then delete who may practice, Ben, and then I will call on Jim. Thanks for your patience. Oh, you just put yourself back on mute, Jim.
Now, you've addressed my issue because even though I'm a non-lawyer, I do have somewhat knowledge of the English language. And I thought the term accrediting and Amy's objective of increasing this and make it easy was inconsistent. But if you dropped accredited, I'm on board.
Okay, that sounds great. Bill and then Bernard.
I just wanted to say that the model rules committee hasn't finished its work, but currently it's using the term non-lawyer representative in the model rules. And again, the model rules deal with adjudications, not necessarily everything that may be involved in some of this, which may technically be an adjudication, but to not have a judge or administrative judge involved in it. So that's why I think C is important, because it's an additional type of thing.
Great. So we'll get to C in a second, but just to make sure I understand the thrust of where you're going with B, Bill, is that B currently is consistent with what the ongoing work of the Model Rules Committee is offering. Is that right? Okay, great. I see you're nodding. Bernard, let me recognize you.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm wondering if instead of allowing, recognizing and overseeing might be better. Either way, people think. But
but I don't think you can say recognizing non-lawyers to represent. You could, but you also can't say overseeing non-lawyers to represent. So recognizing
and overseeing qualified non-lawyers to represent. Well, that's if it's
in
problematic, that's fine.
Yeah, but it's still, the grammar still doesn't work either way. So
Okay.
No. I'm saying you have flagged something that makes it clear that the language on the screen doesn't work from a grammatical perspective. So you can't say allowing non-lawyers. You can say allowing non-lawyers to represent, but you can't say overseeing non-lawyers to represent. So do we have a quick fix here? Recognizing anyway is what Bernard is suggesting. So do people have their hats on helping me get this language going? Recognizing and overseeing qualified non-lawyers in representing, does that work? Steph?
I mean, are they always representing them, or might they just be assisting them?
Well, Bill, that's a good question, but Bill, I thought we were distinguishing between representation and, which is what B is about, and assisting is in number C, or Steph, does that not, Bill's nodding, but does that not capture what you're getting at?
No, that's okay. But can we say who regularly represent individuals before the agency?
Because you're looking for the like consistency, whereas C is kind of the one-offs.
Yeah, I think it just reads a little.
Yeah. Okay. This sentence is getting unwieldy, and I'm starting to think that some of it is committee on style. But so, Steph, tell me your last thing that you want to get in here. It was who regularly.
Yeah, who regularly represent individuals before the agency.
Great. And so then, let's try to go for recognizing, unless people, which was Bernard's most recent suggestion, unless people prefer allowing, in which case I'd like to hear about it. And then otherwise, I'd like to suggest that we flag these miscellaneous substantive words and allow the committee on style to make the grammar work. Matt, is that what you were going to say?
I was going to suggest that we might not need overseeing because qualified takes care of that. And so you might then just simplify the language quite easily.
That would do that, but I don't think that gets to the concern that somebody raised before, which is that it is sort of a two-step process, that the initial, you can be qualified at the beginning, but you may not be qualified a year later. And so that's sort of gets to the need to continually oversee. But Bill?
Not only recognized, in other words, they can represent them, but then they are subject to being overseen during the representation. And that's exactly what's done in the model rules.
Okay, so I think we probably need a two for verb here. And my current suggestion that if people are comfortable with the thrust of the nouns and verbs on the screen that we let the Committee on Style work out the actual grammar. If anybody wants to weigh in before we do that, please do. Okay, let's go to C now, which is the complement. Bill.
Well, I was still trying to get a B.
You're still on B. Fine, fine.
I mean, well, I don't think I like recognize, because I don't know what it means to recognize somebody. And the idea is to allow people who are non-lawyers to represent people in situations where perhaps normally we have lawyers represent them. And so I mean, whether it's a credit, I don't like accrediting either, but I think allowing gets across the idea, and I don't know what recognizing means in this thing.
Bernard, do you want to comment on what you were trying to do with recognizing?
Sure. So it's a less formal term than accrediting. So there's some system of recognizing the ability of the person to operate on a regular basis in the agency.
But if we take out accredit and put in allow, are you trying to suggest that recognize is better than allow? Or is allow also okay with you?
It's almost kind of 50, 6 of one half dozen of the other. So as long as there's no grammatical problem with allowing, because I think you had a concern about that, then allowing is fine.
Okay, so
maybe
let's go.
This is something for Committee on Style.
Yeah, let's go back to allowing then. And my concern was with the back half of the sentence. So the Committee on Style will take that up. Let's go back to allowing. All right, so I'm going to now move on from B, subject to last minute hands going up in the air. And let's work on C now, which is the complement to B, allowing individuals to obtain assistance from other individuals, such as family or friends. I don't know whether people like the other individuals doubling up language, whether there's any other modification people want to suggest. Is it clear that C is who the other, I'll recognize Bill, go ahead.
Here, I'm a little concerned about allowing, right? I mean, can the agency disallow an individual from providing assistance to somebody? I mean, it seems it's not allowing, it's sort of like encouraging,
welcoming,
or welcoming, or something like that. I see Pam's hand up. And
great, yeah. I'll call him Pam.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this is sort of redundant. I apologize. I somehow didn't catch this initially. I think it's redundant. It's already happening in some ways. I actually think agencies might rely a little too heavily on family to assist. But I don't know if someone had like some strong sense of like why this should be here that I'm not cluing into in terms of why that would be important. But
I sort of think people were saying before that they did really like C as an important complement to B. I took that to be the thrust of a couple of the comments, in that we're trying to move beyond just like non-lawyer representatives who regularly appear before the family, and trying to make sure that the family members who might do like a one-off would be welcomed or encouraged or something like that, to use Bill's words. So I think the thrust of the previous couple of comments was that it wasn't redundant, because B and C are getting at different things. Does that speak to you as a consultant on the project, or not?
Yeah, I mean, and this may be like the non-lawyer, do you know what I mean? This may be because I'm like not a lawyer. I think most of the evidence around in practice, certainly in like most of our largest programs, is that family members are already doing this fairly intensively. So for many programs, it is literally your family member applying for you, not you applying, for example, meaning like they're the ones filling out all the paperwork or actively this is like already intensely happening. So I think that's where I'm a bit flummoxed, where I know it's like when we talked about this initially, the focus was on the sort of lawyer piece because there's specific in the legal part, I guess, in terms of like, and maybe Amy can speak to this, but there was like this sort of specific thing that actually wasn't happening, whereas the family stuff really is happening fairly intensively. So
I
it's-
think one danger of not including it, though, would be that agencies would sort of let it fall off the radar screen. So, you know, even if it's already happening, there might be some value in keeping it here. At least that was, I think, the goal of having it here initially. But I hear you saying that you feel like it's possibly redundant and we don't need to leave it off. So I'll solicit some other views. Unless I don't mean to cut you off.
The last thing I'll say, maybe I should just be clear. It's not just that I think it's redundant. I think it's kind of problematic. So it's like in the same way that we don't want to make it incredibly challenging for individuals to access programs. We also don't want to have like, if you think about holistically the amount of burdens that people face when they're trying to access programs and services, right? Like, the bigger point of this report, right, is like we want to sort of reduce that burden by either shifting stuff back to the agency or figuring out ways to simplify processes so that everyone has less burden. What I would generically say now is for individuals, like for example, for disabled individuals, when agencies like are well aware that many disabled people literally cannot navigate these processes, so they assume families are doing it. And that's not a
okay. So you're saying that having the recommendation there might allow agencies to use it as a crutch almost.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And not do some of the other things.
Other
Okay.
views.
All right. So I thank you, Pam, for that view. I want to hear from Amy. Bernard, I saw you have a point in the chat, and then I welcome other views on how we're going to handle C as a complement or not to what we have on B. So first Amy, then Bernard, and then anyone else.
So I just want to echo what Pam is saying and make a suggestion that we switch D and C because I think that A, B, and D are things that we are actively saying need to happen that's different. And then the current C becomes the new D and says something along the lines of continue to facilitate so that we don't leave it out, so that it's still there as kind of a catch-all. But that, like as Pam made the point, it's already happening and maybe happening too much. So maybe putting the first three together as changes that will take some of the pressure off of family and friends and onto more structured supports.
May I ask a clarifying question before I call on Bernard, which is, Amy and Pam, are there any agencies that actually affirmatively don't allow this kind of help that's reflected in C?
Not that I'm aware of.
So then, because if part of the concern is that A, B, and D are new and C is old hat and we don't want them to over rely on it, what about just moving some version of C into the first sentence of recommendation 14? So agencies should increase the availability of assistance for individuals interacting with their programs beyond simply allowing individuals to obtain assistance from other individuals, such as family or friends. So Pam, I see you nodding. Amy, would that capture
I think
some
so.
of the concern?
I don't recall. I mean, I'm aware of the family and friends representative phenomena, but I don't recall that being part of our discussions or reports. So I mean, I'm fine with what you just suggested. I think that captures the spirit of the report.
So Ben, let me ask you to get that on the screen just so that people can see what it might look like.
Can you just give it to me one more time?
Sure.
Beyond
continuing to allow individuals to obtain assistance from other individuals, such as family or friends. And then we would delete C, with the idea being that what the recommendation is like, let's maintain what's good, but let's not over rely on it. So let's add these three new things. So that's a possible proposal. Okay, Amy, I see you, and then Bernard. So circle back to Amy and then Bernard.
I like that. I would just suggest maybe not allow individuals in that new language and maybe something like encourage, because allow just seems to think.
Yeah.
As if there's
Okay, and I see Bernard wants to weigh in on that as well. So it could be beyond. Okay, continuing to encourage. This is getting unwieldy, but let me call in Bernard.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm fine with the changes here. I was going to suggest certainly continue to facilitate in preference to allow. encourage, I guess, works as well. I wonder if we lose something by not recommending that agencies take further efforts to facilitate assistance from other individuals. But if the consultants think this is better, I'm willing to defer to their views on that.
So that's, I think, a substantive question for you, Amy and Pam. If we pull it back and have it be old C or D or whatever, move it to D, make it one of the pulled out lists. We could say facilitate, which would be like a stronger thing. That's Bernard's recommendation. I think I heard, especially maybe from Pam, that agencies were over relying. So I'm not sure that was within what your goal was, but again, we're like hashing this out as a committee. And so I wonder what your reaction is based on the work that you did for the report.
I mean, I'll defer to Pam if she wants to jump in, but I think the spirit of the report is just to get more assistance in every and all ways possible to folks that are trying to navigate these complex processes. So I'm fine with either. I do think that A, B, and our current D are kind of more innovations that we're putting forward or really kind of, making changes as opposed to what to do with these other individuals that people are relying on. I mean, I'm fine with having it up front in 14 or having it as a D, after the 3 changes, have it as continue to facilitate or something along those lines.
And it could also be sort of, Amy, capturing what you're saying now, could be something like taking further steps to facilitate, which would sort of both capture what you're going for, which is let's expand it. Not totally sure it matches what Pam is going for, but that would go with what Bernard is going for.
I will just say, I mean, from our work in the report, I don't think that we isolated any instances where people were, where that was a problem, where, that I don't know that that's a gap that needs, I mean, I think the facilitation is happening, but I mean, I'm not averse to making it more. if I think Pam may not agree with that. If we want to kind of give it a boost or if we just want to leave it as is, either way, I'm kind of fine.
And I'll also bring back Jim's conversation from the beginning. I think it was you, Jim, talking about being at the DMV. Was that you? And kind of somebody behind you, and it's like that idea that maybe the DMV could be taking further steps to facilitate. I don't really know what the how folks overall in the room are feeling. But so we have these couple of options here. And I think it's like, do we want it up at the top of 14 or do we want to call it out as its own? And then do we want to, if we're calling it out, well, I guess either way, are we trying to encourage agencies to do it more, such as further facilitate? Or are we just going to kind of let them do what they're currently doing? Bill.
I'd rely on the reporters with respect to what the report supports. And I guess what that is not to call for more of this, but just it sort of doesn't address it really, other than say it's going on. And so I don't care whether it's C, D, or in the first sentence, but I certainly don't think it should be allowed because that sounds like some sort of, we won't allow it in some cases. We don't want that. Either encourage, facilitate, whatever, but not allow.
Okay. So I don't actually hear anybody urging that it go back as a called out list. I think I hear people generally being okay with it up as the first sentence of 14, as that basically is what the report supports, kind of pulling together Bill's point with where we heard from Amy and Pam. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up from those who are giving the thumbs up. So then we are deleting C below, thank you. And I think we have to decide what verb we want to use. And I think I don't hear anybody in favor of allow. I think I basically hear that people like facilitate, and then the grammar doesn't work, but then we just have to smooth it out, and that's committee on style. Do people like the word facilitate? If you don't like the word facilitate and would like to propose an additional word or an alternative word, please put your hand up or say that you want to be recognized in the chat. And otherwise, I think let's keep it as facilitate and let the committee on style work out the grammar of the sentence that follows. Okay, so let's try to keep facilitate, and we'll leave that to the committee on style to smooth the language. So then we're going to go to what was formerly D, but is now new C at line 145, and I'll call on Amy Bunk.
Hi, I'm having some computer issues, so hopefully I can get through this. I'm struggling a little with the term internal on line 145. I'm not quite clear what that means, if it's internal support within the agency, except that line 14, the overarching intro, talks about how it's the availability of assistance for. So if that's the case.
Amy, we're losing you a little bit, but I think the thing,
wouldn't it be providing support through frontline agency staff? But I'm not sure that that gets to what's innovative.
Okay, I think we lost you a little bit there, Amy, but I think we got enough. I think your concern is about the use of the word internal as being a little ambiguous, especially since I think the point of the recommendation is that we're relying on people inside the agency to provide external help. So it's a little bit confusing there in the language. I remember also last time that we had some concern about who we were including, what frontline agency staff meant. I think our taxpayer colleague, advocate colleague is not on the line now, although I could be wrong about that, but I think it was she who raised some of those concerns. So let's put a kind of a flag / potential delete of internal. And then, thanks. And then I'm going to call on Amy, but I would also love to hear folks from agencies and otherwise who want to weigh in on what kind of support we're exactly talking about here. Amy.
I just wanted to clarify too, I think that this may have been originally two separate thoughts, which in the report, which is one is to increase the use of ombuds, public advocates, and to support frontline staff in their efforts to provide assistance and support to people navigating these programs. And then also to the extent that, so the navigate, like the taxpayer, those sorts of programs are kind of a little bit third party and somewhat, I think, to the side. I'm not exactly sure if somebody from tax is on that could speak to that.
Okay, I'll call on Amy Bunk again.
I'm not from tax. I do work currently for a federal agency, and I used to work for the Department of Homeland Security, where like USCIS, there's that agency, and then there's a separate ombudsman for USCIS, and there's also an ombudsman now for ICE detention. And while they're all under the umbrella of DHS, they're not necessarily within the particular component of DHS, if that makes sense, for the ombuds.
Okay, thanks for that, Amy Bunk. Amy Widman, is part of what you're suggesting that we need to pull these apart, and so that we need to be suggesting that agencies do internal facing work as like one version of this, and then in additional use those internal facing whatevers to do external work?
I think that that's part of it. One of the thought lines here was to support the frontline agency staff who often are kind of providing this external assistance.
And what's the kind of support that you learned about or that you write about? Like, what do you mean by internal support?
I think that's internal agency kind of organization and management to support and hear from and consult these frontline agency staff as they are assisted, although that goes a little bit to identifying the burdens as opposed to reducing them.
And I think it might also go to agency organization, which is the next big category we're about to talk to.
It could be that getting rid of internal kind of solves the problems I'm seeing as well. I mean, this idea of where an ombuds actually sits, who the frontline agency staff, where they sit are, as opposed to navigator programs. I mean, you've got kind of a range of locations there. So maybe getting rid of internal and just saying something along, increasing assistance through these people. Or
Okay, and I think I remember even that some people weren't, last time, some people didn't like the use of the word frontline. And I think I remember that we even were talking about taking it out because it wasn't clear exactly who we meant by frontline agency staff, but I could be wrong about that. So I'd like to hear from other folks about this. Pam?
I can just provide a little bit. I think getting rid of internal helps. What makes this complicated, right, is the federalism style system where you have like, a federal agency is actually, providing financial support to local entities, either nonprofits or state agencies to actually like deliver these services, right? And then it's those frontline staff in either non-governmental funded by government or governmental agencies that are providing hands-on assistance to people applying for trying to maintain government programs. So it's just like super messy. So I do actually think something like expanding support for frontline agency staff as well, you could do as well as ombuds, public advocates, and navigator programs, or you could do such as would be another version. But that's, I think there's a lot captured in this line, which I think Amy is trying to get at. So there's different maybe.
So expanding support for staff to me sounds like it's calling out like increased budget for or training for, whereas then the substance of what those people would be doing would be expanding their ability to serve the public. So now I do think maybe you are talking about a two-track kind of thing, or
it's hard to get your head around because it just comes in like this federalism thing, right? Like it comes, the way that the money flows from federal agencies down to the people actually, down to frontline agency staff, public advocates, even navigators, is just really messy. So I'm sorry, I'm not being very helpful here other than to just, I think that line is hard because it is super messy. So I'm not sure it.
Okay, I mean, so totally recognize we just need to be disaggregating with precision what the messiness is so that we can come up with a recommendation to precisely address discrete lines of the messiness. Or as I'm always saying to my students, the job of the lawyer is to take the mess of the world and to put it in discrete categories. So let's go back to line 134. So the recommendation, that the overarching sentence we're trying to do here is agencies should increase the availability of assistance for individuals interacting with their programs. So the things that follow this list all have to be in the vein of agencies increasing the availability of assistance for individuals interacting with their programs. Amy Woodman?
The spirit of what we're going for here, and I think there's also an agency organization thing to discuss in a minute, but for here, the spirit is expanding the use of ombuds, public advocates, navigator programs, and other sorts of agency support that will help, in addition to non-lawyer representatives, in addition to family and friends, in addition to legal aid, this kind of agency provided.
Okay, so let's do that. And then in a minute, I'm going to do a pin in agency organization to capture the other half of the mess that Pam was, reminding us that we need to grapple with, because that does sound maybe more like that's an intra-governmental thing, even though it's an intergovernmental thing. See what I did there? So Amy, can you get your language back there so that Ben can capture it? Expanding.
Expanding assistance through the use of, and then if we want to list, I don't know, ombuds, public advocates, navigator programs, frontline age. I don't know what the universe is there other than.
Okay, so just pause for a second. Expanding assistance through the use of. And Amy, were you suggesting take out frontline agency staff? We could also just take out frontline.
I had to go teach last time, and I don't think I was here for the frontline agency staff discussion, so I'm not sure what.
So let's take out frontline though, because I think that was some of what Nina was suggesting was problematic last time.
I think that works.
Through the use of agency staff. including, and then public advocates and navigator programs, those are all sort of internal to agencies, at least as I understand, like the taxpayer advocate, okay. So I think does this capture, John, let me call on you.
I think adding frontline staff is important because that's the people
okay.
that actually talk to clients and recipients. Ombuds and public advocates are like 2 or 3 steps away from the front line.
Okay, maybe I had misremembered Nina's comment. I thought she was concerned that we were using the word frontline in a way that she didn't want to. So say, John, one more time, who you think frontline,
including agency staff, including frontline
staff. Yes. Okay. Maybe that was her concern, that there was a mismatch between the adjective modifier at the beginning and not. Okay. So we'll delete there. Can you add the comma there, or the space after the comma rather? So expanding assistance through the use of agency staff, including frontline staff, ombuds, public advocates, and navigator programs. Bridget?
Oh, I hate to, I don't think navigator program, like people who work in navigator programs are agency staff. I think it's usually like they're licensed or accredited to be helpers, but they might actually be employed by a nonprofit, for example. Sorry.
No, please don't apologize. Does that mean that, what is the implication of that knowledgeable observation? Is it that navigator programs should be cut entirely? Should it move to A? Should it move, if in fact navigator programs are not employed by agency staff, what do you then want to do with the words?
It can't be in the list following agency staff. I think
okay.
So maybe it's frontline staff, ombuds, and public advocates, as well as navigator program. I'm not sure, but you have to somehow like snip the line.
Yeah.
Describing agencies.
Pam, Amy, Don, what do we know about navigator programs from now that we have A, B, and new C on the screen? Does navigator programs go somewhere else, or does it belong here because it's sort of one of those things that's funded by agencies and so needs to be here with agencies?
Like, for example, that one of the first of them was funded under Obamacare.
Okay, so it's government funded, which makes it different from the things that are called out in A, which might or might not be government funded. Okay, so then Bridget's point was just more in the vein of separating out the grammar rather than saying it couldn't belong here as well. So expanding assistance through the use of agency staff, including frontline staff, ombuds, public advocates. And Amy, are you going to chime in on a wording?
I think in the report we labeled it as agency and other third parties or something like that. So expanding assistance through the use of agencies
and other government funded third parties,
something like that, and then the including could include navigator programs. I forget. I'm trying to find in our original report what language, but I think there were third-party organizations was something that we used to capture this.
But are those third-party organizations distinct from the third-party organizations in line 137?
I think some of them are. The navigator, I think that's the distinction, but maybe we haven't.
And is the distinction really government funded?
No.
Well,
because of course legal services is also
right.
like part,
That's true. It's my sense it's built within the agency program in a different sort of way than legal aid, which is also government funded, but somewhat stands alone.
So it is thorny.
Bridget, I'll call on you in a second. Let's get Pam.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Pam.
Oh, so it is thorny because some, like the Navigator program for Obamacare, absolutely came through federal funding that flowed through CMS. But then you have, like, if Nina were here, what I think she would say is that at the same time for tax programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit, third parties that are not really government funded are actively encouraged by the IRS and work with the IRS to do outreach for things like the Earned Income Tax Credit. So those would be and not necessarily legal aid organizations. They can be community agencies that have like maybe some kind of government funding, but not necessarily from the IRS. But IRS really does interact with those groups to help do outreach. So it is, it's just super messy.
Okay, so Bridget, I'll call on you. Bernard, you have a recommendation. I'll call on you in a second. And I would love to wrap up C and then we'll take our quick break. But let me get Bridget first.
Yeah, I think it's easy enough to distinguish A because what's going on in A is actual representation. Whereas in C, I mean, a navigator, for example, helps you understand like what is health insurance and how do I pick a plan that's appropriate for me? And then you then go make your own choice. Like they don't represent you anyway. They might help you fill out paperwork, but it's still you filling out the paperwork, you know? So I think
Great.
if you inserted something like, and, you know, third-party programs or non-governmental programs such as navigator programs, I think that gets it done.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Bernard, you had another suggestion for language.
Yeah, I mean, that may solve the problem, but I was going to suggest and government-sponsored navigator programs, because it sounded to me like all of these navigator programs were in one way or another sponsored by, or at least encouraged by, a government agency. But I don't know if that's right or not.
Yeah, so Pam, I saw a thumbs up. Pam, Amy, Don, does that capture the government sponsored? Does that, okay. So expanding assistance through the use of agency staff. Should we just say agency staff and government sponsored programs, comma, including, and then we go back to navigator programs at the end of the list? Or do we need to call?
Maybe government sponsored and supported, which is what I heard. I thought I heard Art saying, which I like.
Okay, well then let's, so Ben, work with, don't delete what I said before. So let's keep the beginning part of the sentence, expanding assistance through the use of agency staff. So keep this, including frontline staff, ombuds, and public advocates, comma, and now let's fiddle with this new language, and government sponsored and supported entities, such as navigator programs. Does that work? Any further thoughts on this? Okay, Ben, can you just put a hyphen or a dash before supported so it's clear that government goes to, yeah, just like hanging out there by itself. Okay, thanks, Ben. Amy, Bunk.
Sorry, going back to expanding assistance.
Okay.
Is that adding more, or is that just highlighting where these groups or offices can be found? Or is that something that can be maybe spelled out in the preamble? Thanks.
So Pam, Amy, Don, what are you trying to, is expanding assistance what you mean, or do you mean like improving the use of, or like, what's your substantive response to Amy Bunk's comment?
I think the idea was to encourage agencies to consider actually building out more of these programs. The ombuds programs, you know, as exist are very specific and isolated, and so maybe expanding assistance doesn't get there. But that's
what about just expanding the use of? We could just cut out assistance through.
But it's not just the use of what the ones that already exist. It's actually considering how to build more navigator programs, more ombuds, more public advocates.
Expanding assistance through increased use of, or not even use of, through increased, no, but it's not, we can't, because it's through the use of agency staff.
Developing and expanding assistance through.
Let me call on Bill Funk, who might have some language to suggest.
About expanding the use of.
Yeah, that captures it, I think, because it's just talking about doing more work with agency staff. Pam? Amy done? Okay. All right, so I want to just one final read through of the sentence as it currently stands, and then we'll take our break and then we'll come back. Expanding the use of agency staff, including frontline staff, ombuds, and public advocates, and government-sponsored and supported entities such as navigator programs. Are we good with this? Okay, I'm scrolling through my screens. Okay. All right, I think we may have reached some consensus here. So we're going to come back in 5 minutes and do recommendation 15 and the rest as far as we can get. Maybe we'll get through all of the recommendations, fingers crossed. So I have 2:42. Let's come back in 5 minutes. So 2:47-ish East Coast time. Okay, see you guys in 5 minutes. Thanks so much. Okay, folks. We ready to get back into place? I see people turning their cameras back on. Thanks so much. So let's dive right back in. Line 148, last recommendation in this section is sort of connected to this recommendation that we were just tweaking when we first started meeting today about what the burden, identifying the burdens that are within agencies' authorities. So I think we might actually need to change the language statute, traceable to statute, to match the language above. But let me just give a minute for people to read this and see what proposals people would like to make.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, Bernard, did you want to be recognized? I think, do we have capability of muting someone? Ben, okay, thank you. And actually, now that I have relooked at it, I think maybe we don't need to make it parallel before, because the whole point is that we're trying to give OMB a list of things that presumably they could then turn on to Congress. So Steph, do you want to comment on this? Or Bridget? I'll call in Bridget, who put her hand up, but Steph, if you're available, we'd also love to hear from you. Go ahead, Bridget.
I think, so what's sort of throwing me off on this is, I think I'm just misunderstanding it, because if an agency can't trace to a statute, then what are they doing, right? So I guess, is the answer to this not just all the things, all the lists of all the burdens they impose? So
this recommendation comes from, Ben, can you actually take us back up there? Do you know the one that I'm talking about? The one where we were trying to call out what's within agencies' authority. This should be in the identifying. It's with respect to this one. So to determine what's within the agency's authority, the idea is distinguishing between those burdens that agencies themselves have basically created and therefore have the authority to fix themselves. And that's what burden reduction strategies is going for. This other recommendation is a list of burdens that are traceable to statute, but that agencies don't think are serving any purpose. This may not be something the committee wants to tackle, but the idea was to sort of be further distinguishing between what's within agencies' ability already to reduce and what agencies are doing because Congress has told them to do it. But Congress may not know that they're imposing all these burdens, and so may wish, right, the burdens may sort of be accidental or not have been sort of thoroughly weighed out, the costs and the benefits and such. So that's, I think, the thrust of this recommendation. Let me first call on Steph and then I'll call on Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the fence about this recommendation. I do think if agency, I think it's great if agencies do that. If they provide the information to OMB in their annual performance reports, I do think it would be of interest, but I guess I'm not sure that like a list of programs that imposed burden is necessarily actionable in the way that we usually have agencies provide legislative proposals and consider the cost impacts of those proposals is through the budget process, which is sort of entirely separate. And so I don't mean to muddy the waters, but I guess I'm just trying to figure out like what we OMB would do with this information we've received it in this form. And I'm a little worried that the answer is we wouldn't be sure what to do with it.
Yeah. And can I just ask a clarifying question? If the information about statutorily imposed burdens that agencies aren't sure is doing any work were to come to OMB in a different form, would that be actionable? Or are you thinking that this kind of macro list just wouldn't be valuable, period? Or wouldn't be actionable, period, no matter what format it's coming in?
I do think it would be valuable. I guess I think if an agency feels that it isn't useful and Congress should address it, normally they would prepare a legislative proposal and submit that. And so I'd have to look up the vehicle for them to do that, but it's associated with the budget process. And so I think that would be more useful in terms of like, that's the way that we direct information to Congress.
So if we were to keep this recommendation, it sounds like some more actionable, instead of a list of identified versions, would be sort of like if agencies kind of just think that certain statutorily imposed burdens are not worth it, they could, compile proposed legislative language or something like that. That sounds like maybe what could be more actionable if we decide to keep this at all. Okay, I see a lot of hands, so let me go to Jeremy, Bill, Bridget, and Jim.
Just minor stylistic point. Instead of are traceable, do you want to say something like are required by statute or mandated by statute? I think that's what we're going to get here.
Thanks, Jeremy. Bill.
Well, I think I was sort of going to say the same thing you've been saying, which is there's sort of two ideas here. One is they ought to identify the burdens that are imposed by statute. Two, they should decide whether or not they think those burdens are necessary or could be relieved in some way. And if so, then to compile a proposed legislative fix. So maybe it's three different steps. And whether we keep it or not, I'm ambiguous about, but or ambivalent about. But I think those three steps have to be recognized as being 1, 2, 3.
Great. So let's put those steps on the screen substantively, just so people can look at them, and then after we get them up on the screen, I'll call in Bridget and Jim. So propose legislative language to remediate the burden or to lessen or to fix or whatever. Okay. Thanks for getting those three things up there, Ben. And now Bridget.
Oh, me? Okay, sorry. So I think you want to start from like at the point when the agency realizes that there's a statutory barrier to reducing burden, like the agency would lower the burden, but for the statutory language that's requiring to keep the burden high. I think that's what you want to identify rather than like the sources of all burden that you can track directly back to statutory language, not least because finding the line between explicit statutory mandate and agency discretion is, it's just hard. And I just don't know that you have to go through that in order to get meaningful here, which is just to say, and maybe, trying to link this to the performance reports. I mean, maybe you say for all of the HISPs, you do a data call, or you provide data in the APR about statutory barriers to reducing burden as just another element of the annual performance report or something. But it's actually kind of hard for me to believe that folks aren't already doing that as part of as part of what's going on right now. So maybe that's a place where Steph can kind of enlighten us about like what agencies are already on the hook to provide, and what, if anything, else they could do, any analysis they could do that would be helpful.
Okay, so I want to both call on Jim and then Steph, but I want to first capture the core of what Bridget has just said. So then underneath this, yeah, so another version of it. So this is really specific, right? So it's the high service provider. What's the I stand for? Impact?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so leave his there as a placeholder, but then hit return. Because then the first thing that Bridget was talking about was something like where agencies identify what they believe to be an unnecessary burden.
Or where they identify statutory barriers to reducing burden.
Sure, yeah. Where exists statutory barriers to reducing an unnecessary burden.
Yeah. And I think that's helpful. OMB doesn't, if OMB, you could imagine a package of these like going up to the Hill in the form of a legislative proposal that isn't just one agency, right? You could take like 10 and sort of say, here's a package of legislative changes that we'd make that would really help. So,
but let's just finish the back half of your sentence, Bridget, to capture your thought. So where agencies identify statutory barriers to reducing unnecessary burdens, they should propose.
I think that's where. Yeah.
Okay, then we would have to go back to Steph. Okay, they should. Can you just do a placeholder here then?
They should consider proposing legislation.
Okay, they should consider proposing legislation. All right, thanks for that, Bridget. So let me go to Jim, John Kamensky, and then back to Steph.
Yeah, I guess there's a question in my mind. There is a very detailed process in OMB for legislative proposals. And generally, you before you make public a recommendation to the agency or to the Congress, it goes through that process. I think it's A16 or A17. I forget the number. And so I don't see how this jives. Are we asking the agencies to give us proposed legislation that they want, or just identify the problem areas? If it's just identifying the problem areas, I see no problem. If it's really looking at the legislative proposals, I think there is a problem. And so the second point is that to what extent are these things that are really troublesome, can they be addressed in the Paperwork Reduction Act clearance process? Now, some people will argue, well, they're mandated. Well, there's a question which ones are not mandated. So they can get a lot of relief from this burden stuff by just using the paperwork clearance process without going through legislation. And finally, if the question is the statutes that they would be amending, I guess would be their organic statutes to that agencies, and that opens up a lot. But that's all my comments. Thank you.
So thanks for that, Jim. So Ben, can you just write down PRA ? In this where we're just sort of capturing stuff, because we have a whole section of recommendations for OMB below. And another way of thinking about this recommendation could be OMB should consider inviting agencies to, and then do sort of the thrust of what's in Bridget's proposed revisions here. But we'll hear from Steph in a minute, but first let me call on John Kamensky.
Two different points. One is there is an existing provision in the GPRA Modernization Act for agencies to annually prepare lists of unnecessary agency reports and provide that list to OMB, which then will formulate legislation. And you might want to follow that pattern as opposed to saying it should appear in the performance reports. The second is that—
So before you go to the second, John, can I just ask Ben? Yeah, okay, great. I just wanted you to capture that.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. and there's language in A11 as to how to do all that, and it doesn't tie it to the annual performance report. The second is that limiting it to the high impact service providers is very narrow. I would not focus solely on those as the target.
Okay, the idea being that other agencies also have
Well,
burdens.
and within an agency, there's a lot more programs.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks for that. Steph.
I guess I think that John's model is a good one. My only concern is that model, the identification of unnecessary reports, like that reporting is done consistent with guidance based on OMB. And I think, we'd be moving from something that the agencies have done and they're just giving that information to OMB, to OMB structuring and requiring the information. And that's definitely something I would have to take back. And to be totally candid, I think it's something that OMB is thinking about and working on in terms of the OMB performance reporting, but we're just not like there yet. So if I feel more comfortable if it were agencies reporting and their agency goals or submitting legislative proposals consistent with Circular 819. I don't really have a strong prior. I think John's suggestion of agencies identifying it sort of in an analog to what they're doing is helpful, but I don't think OMB is at the point of providing guidance on this yet.
Okay, so then I think trying to kind of combine the last couple of comments on Ben's list, the comment he's working on in the middle, we would maybe start with the middle one, the where agencies identify statutory barriers to reducing unnecessary burdens. And so we probably want S's in both places after barriers as well. They should, given maybe ambivalence I hear from people, they should consider, as opposed to they should, is maybe where we actually are at as a committee. And then I think we want to just be following, there's the sort of technical stuff that both Jim and John have raised about kind of different statutory paths, and I'm not exactly sure what we should be doing here. Steph, I saw your hand go right back up.
I was just going to offer to work on this with the consultants and conference staff sort of in the interim period between now and the next recommendation, or whoever's interested.
Yeah,
really,
great.
but,
That sounds great. And so Ben and Matt, let's make sure to bring Steph in from the OMB perspective, since they're sort of the central point for the legislative proposals here. Bridget, do you want to get back in and try to facilitate the rest of the sentence? That'd be great. And then I'll call in Bernard.
Nope. No more sentence help coming from me.
Oh, okay.
Another idea.
Can we just, I just want to find something to capture those last two things, and then I'll call in the two of you maybe. So, but maybe we'll just have brackets, because I'm not exactly sure how to make it work with the actual law. But so they should consider, one was the Jim Tosey had like maybe Ben do a bracket and just say some PRA should consider asking OMB for PRA relief, blah, blah, blah. Though again, I know we have a PRA section coming up. And then a second bracket, would be about the GP. I don't even know how we say the acronym. The Performance Act. Okay, let me go to Bridget, who wanted to then say something else, and then we'll go to Bernard and then back to Steph.
Yeah, so I think I can flesh out some of the PR process idea, which would either be that, agencies would identify these barriers in their ordinary Paperwork Reduction Act review with OMB. And the upside of that is within a 3-year period, OMB would have touched every single, information collection that the government does. And so if, for example, when an agency was preparing its materials for OMB, it had a section it needed to fill out on is this an unnecessary statutory barrier? Or if it found it to be an unnecessary statutory barrier, it flags that in its materials when it's going through both the public comment process and OMB review. That could be a really helpful input that over the course of 3 years would yield a potentially really helpful list of things that could be proposed, that could be ultimately rolled up into some kind of legislative package. So that's how I would think of leveraging the PRA process to like find this stuff.
And then can you help it? Ben is trying to capture the substance of what you're saying, but I wonder if you could help us get a phrase that would do it.
I think this is where I'd be happy to leave to Steph to sort that out.
Okay. All right. So then if we get the substance in, that then becomes a committee on style with some OMB input. Okay. Thanks for that, Bridget. On the PRA front, Bernard, let me go to you.
So just a quick point, in working through this, I would urge that you think about having these alternatives be an agency adopt one or more of these alternatives. So I don't think you should just rely on one, but one or more depending on what's appropriate, essentially.
Okay. Bridget.
Yeah, and just to flesh out what the GIPRA thing or GIPRAMA, that's how you pronounce those two always.
Thanks.
The GIPRA thing is something that Son ably mentioned. It is an annual report that agencies need to send information to OMB about unnecessary reports.
So we'd be adding a report on unnecessary reports.
Adding a report, agencies are required to provide inputs for an annual report, that would presumably go to transmitted by OMB that would say, here's our list of the unnecessary statutory barriers to burden reduction. So that's the analog in GIPRA. GIPRA's huge, but that's the part that John is flagging.
Okay. So thank you for that, Bridget. Thank you for all the previous commenters' input. So I think the idea on the table is that with these comments fleshed out, we're comfortable then saying the Committee on Style should formulate these into some specific sentences and then work on language with OMB that captures the actual legal construct. Okay, I see some nods for that. So unless I hear any objections, I think we'll move on. Okay, great. I see some thumbs up and I see no objections. So the next section then is agency organization. Then we have a section on agency collaboration. And then can you just keep scrolling down so we can see the headers just so that we're, and then we have some new, this is what the former just OMB section was. Okay, we have some new proposals from OMB. And is that and then that's the last, right? That's the last thing,
yes.
Ben? So we have just these 3 sections to do. Okay, great.
It might be helpful to think about that last section as dealing with, measurement of burdens, data sharing, and then kind of PRA related flexibilities. I feel like the current title doesn't reflect kind of where maybe
I think that's right. And so I actually think we're going to have to come back to that. I think of that as the kind of the OMB section. But let's just so that we can see as a committee kind of the thrust of what we're doing, and also so that we remember, because we don't want to be saying that something should go here when actually it's going to come later. So let's work on agency organization now. So let's take a minute to look at number 16. I'm not going to read it out loud, but let's take a minute and then I'll look for hands with suggestions. Okay, so I will start us off by saying we should just be consistent with how we refer to GIPRA or GIPRAMA, but beyond that, substantive points are now welcome. I'll start with John. You're on mute, John.
Is it agency responsibilities in the headline as opposed to agency organization? Would that better explain what that section is about?
Yeah, maybe. Amy, Don,
Yeah.
Pam?
I think that's reasonable, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So let's delete organization and make it responsibilities. Anything on substance with number 16? Okay, well, let's bring in number 17 then. Again, I won't read it as a couple of sentences, but everybody take a minute and look at number 17. But yeah, Ben, keep 16 on the screen too, if you could. Okay, anything on number 17? Bridget.
I was only at part of the last meeting. Have we already decided how we're handling instances of customer in this recommendation and thinking of members of the public as customers?
Yeah, so I think we didn't fully decide on it, except for I'm pretty sure we avoided. Here, can we go back up actually, Ben, to where did we did change the word, as I recall. Although I also remember we were trying to stick with the language of the executive order in some way. So it's in the beginning. I think it even might be in the principles, Ben.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So it looks like we just plain old took it out. So can you do a control F, Ben, to see where else we have customer? Yeah. I mean, I think at this point we may have it. Yeah, so it's just here now. So, okay, so this suggests to me that we really have taken it out, although we have it still in some of the preamble that we haven't yet talked about. So maybe this is the moment then when we should sort of discuss how we're going to handle this question. We have the issue that we have the customer experience executive order. I know Sam commented, I don't know if he's still on the line, about like a losing battle with that before scrolling through to see if he's still here. I think he may not be here anymore. But so what do we as a committee want to do about this? We are going to have to face it in multiple places. Don.
I think customer experience is a term of art. And so if we talk, I don't think there's going to be a good alternative to customer experience teams in a way that will be recognizable. There may be other places where we want to talk about more broadly clients and citizens and use different terminology, but when we're talking about teams whose specific job is to look at burden reduction processes, my impression is that's already being described as customer experience.
Okay, and so the worry would be that if we change the language here, we would be missing out on just like what's the standard term of art that's already being operationalized. Okay,
so I think if we told agencies do more with customer experience teams, that will be recognizable to them as fitting into something that may already be on their agenda. But if we call it something else, it might become a source of confusion.
Okay, so maybe some of the work is definitional in the preamble. Bridget, I'll go back to you now.
Yeah, I could yield to preamble. I mean, UX is also a term of art that I think is at least somewhat reasonably understood to cover this type of work.
What is UX, Bridget? I don't actually know what UX stands for.
User.
Oh, user.
And I can understand folks having objections to the word user as applied to members of the public too, but I think it is, I would argue at least it is less objectionable than assuming that the public is customers of government services. I remain like deeply allergic to the use of customer in the context of government services. And I recognize this on some level is just like a very silly distinction. On the other hand, it is not. The government is not a business. And so I think language like this, when we slide into just presuming that what we are doing is providing a customer experience, I think that does gloss over and submerge the nature of government work. And I I will not belabor this point. I will merely say I would strongly be in favor of drafting around the C in CX.
So let me try to thread the needle here. If in line 17, we just say, Don, would it lose a lot if we just delete customer? I mean, if it just says to improving the experiences that individuals have when interacting with the agency, teams working on individuals' experiences with you know, just because it is a term of art doesn't necessarily mean that ACUS has to lean into it, question mark? What is your reaction to that? That's sort of trying to thread the needle between what Bridget is saying and what you're saying, with the recognition that whatever we would do, we would define something and use the actual EO language and all that in the preamble, but then that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use the customer language in the text of the document.
I think it would be costless to remove the first customer experiences. But I do, it is like basically, if you look at performance.gov, labeling is federal customer experience there. And if you look at sort of industry standards, and I have the same normative concerns with language here. I'm just concerned about legibility of our recommendations fitting into existing.
What if so if it's costless to delete the first customer, let's just do that and see what that looks like. And then what if instead of customer experience teams, it just says such teams? And then also in line 161, we say such teams. And then in the preamble, we would have defined what we mean with reference to the specifics of the terms of art, et cetera. Don, let me get your reaction first, and then John, I'll call on you, and then Pam, I'll call on you, just sort of thinking through hands in which the order I saw them.
I think it's too vague. We're just describing teams.
Yeah, okay.
When I think there is a more specific meaning we should be latching onto.
Okay. John?
The customer experience people in the agencies would then find this very helpful to mention them so they could leverage this with their agencies. If you blank it out, then they're not going to necessarily say this is us, and that their agencies aren't going to be as supportive. When by putting it in here, there's going to create an internal constituency within the agencies to do something. I think if you try to paper it over, that it's going to be harder for them to deal with their lawyers and other people, because they're able to, the lawyers and other people say, well, that's not you. So I think that trying to work around customer experience is going to, in the implementation of customer experience, make it more difficult. I think that trying to wrap this around is kind of not helpful.
Okay. Thanks for that. Pam, Bernard, Bill.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, as much as I hate the customer language too, this specifically, the customer experience teams, like that's something we heard over and over and over again within agencies. It's how they refer to them. And so I have the same concern that both John and Don do, that in practice, this would really undercut the recommendation.
Okay, Bernard.
So maybe one way to deal with this is to use the term once and not keep repeating it. So for instance, we could say, basically the first two sentences, agencies should have teams devoted to improving the experiences that individuals have when interacting with the agency, often referred to as customer service teams, close paren. And then after that, talk about such teams.
Such teams.
Right.
Okay, I'll circle back to Pam and Don in a minute, but let me first get Bill and then Conway.
I don't know why we want to disavow what's in the executive order, what's a common term in the agencies on some sort of theory of that the definition and the means you have to be buying something from somebody. I think the customer is always right. That's what I hear. Customer experience teams, it's somebody's making sure the customer is served. the person that you're dealing with is served. So I'm in favor of just keeping the darn term all the way across the board and not trying to back away from what the executive order has. I don't see why we should back away from the executive order language.
Okay, thanks for that. Conway.
Yes, I just also wanted to endorse the use of customer experience teams. In particular, I am in support of having the senior career and political appointee work on this customer experience piece, and so having that tied to the political appointee was important for us too.
Okay.
As the success it has at the VA.
Okay, so I think I am hearing that despite some various normative concerns about the use of the word customers, there's some countervailing benefits both on the normative side and on the operational side. What if we keep Bernard's parenthetical? So we keep the first sentence, so we delete customer the way we did, Don said that was costless, but then add Bernard's qualification here so that at least we're sort of signaling here that this is practice that we're not introducing, and then just delete the efforts that I had to have such, and then it would just go back to customer experience teams. Would that mean that sort of gets, I think that kind of covers with a nod to some of the discomfort with the parenthetical. If we do that, do people object to anything here? It sounded like there was more in favor of the current language than otherwise. Bridget?
Yeah, I think I hear all that, and I didn't expect to win on this one. I know the horse is out of the. I'm using this term. I would really welcome some preamble language, just kind of acknowledge the normative concern. And I also, you could consider, although I don't know if it's a good idea, saying rather than often referred to as customer experience teams, you could sort of refer to the relevant executive or the most recent executive order on this, or refer to in executive order such and so as customer experience, right? Because that like really does ground why we're using the term as opposed to independently endorsing it, which again, I'll fall another time.
Great. So it was also like labeled as customer experience teams in executive order, blah, blah. Okay, so I think with that, the rest can be for committee on style. So let's just let Ben finish capturing that. And then there's just a flag for addressing this definitional thing in the preamble. We'll have to take a look to see what we have, and we'll recirculate that before the next meeting. Okay, so I think we're moving past 17 to 18. John Kamensky, I'll actually just give 1 minute for, not actually a minute, I'll give a moment for folks to take a look at number 18. And then John, you had a suggestion for some language, so I'll ask you to be the first speaker.
And unfortunately, I have another substantive point on 17.
Oh, okay. Well, then forget it. Let's pause on 18. I'm sorry. I thought we were done with 17. Let's go back to Bridget's substantive point on 17.
I led with the tedious one, and now I'll go to something more.
Oh, Bridget.
So let's see. Okay, so on this here, I can think of agencies where the nature of what they do, the size of them, et cetera, the resource constraints, whatever, they're not going to do this. And so I guess I'm just wondering, and maybe they shouldn't, right? Like maybe they're quote customers gag, are people that aren't really the ones that we're thinking about in this agenda, in this set of recommendations. So I'm wondering if we should find a way to say, to caveat the types of agencies to whom we're directing them or encouraging them to set up a separate team. And the answer can be no, we just want to leave it the way it is, and they'll know if they're in or they're out. But I don't know that every single agency out there has a need for this in the acute way that some really do.
So I was just about to call on our consultants, but I am now reminded that Don and Pam.
No, I'm still here. I'm staying.
Oh, you're still here? Is it just Don who's leaving?
It's just
okay,
Don.
great.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So then thanks to Don for his other service to the government and burden reduction, and to Pam and Amy and whatever. I assume you're part of that team too, but thanks to Pam and Amy for sticking around. And then so Pam and Amy, I would like to call on you to respond to Bridget's comment in some way. Do we want to single out here? Do we want to capture in some way here in preamble or somewhere else who we mean by this, given her concern?
I had to leave early last meeting, but didn't we discuss something along these lines elsewhere in the report about public facing agencies or something like that? Or am I misremembering?
I don't think we did public facing agencies. I do remember that we just had an exchange, like consultants and me and ACUS, about adding language to the preamble that captured some of what Bridget is getting at. But I actually kind of remember that it was a targeting language rather than a reducing language. And Bridget is talking about sort of like a reducing language. Ben, do you happen to remember where you just added that language that Don was proposing in our last email exchange? Is a little unorthodox to go back up to the preamble that we haven't actually talked about yet, but I'm wondering if there's a way that we can capture the thing that Don just asked to add, but I actually have no idea where we were talking about adding
I
it.
believe I inserted that at the bottom of the second to last paragraph
Of what?
of the preamble.
Oh, of the whole preamble. Okay, sorry. On page, all right, good. So this would be in line 61 to 63. So this is trying to capture the primary focus of burden reduction efforts should be with those federal agencies that have the greatest interaction with the public. The tools are intended to reduce burdens and not become a reporting burden on agencies for whom they're less relevant. It's unorthodox because we don't usually like kind of rely on preamble language that we haven't really talked about in order to do, you know, recommendations. It sort of goes the other way. But Bridget, do you have a reaction to this language that would help you propose language that captures your concern in the recommendation we're currently working on?
I think so. I mean, using the greatest interaction with the public, right? So federal agencies that have the greatest interaction with the public should, you know, establish.
Okay. Okay, great. So let's go back now. Ben, I think, are we in 17? So then we'll just, after agencies that have. Okay, Bridget, I think, does that capture now what your concern is? Does anybody else have anything to say on 17? Connor, your hand is still up. I feel like it's a holdover, but I'm happy to call on you if that is not true. Okay, I'm not hearing anything from Conway, who I think I might have just called Connor. Sorry, Conway, do you have anything to say? Okay. Bernard.
Sorry.
Oh, Conway, did you want to be recognized? Because your hand was up.
No,
first.
it was up inadvertently.
Inadvertently. Okay, great. So Conway's hand is down. Bernard, I'll call on you.
Yes, so with this new language, I'm a little concerned about agencies having the greatest interaction. Well, what's the cutoff there? I mean, technically, it could mean one or two agencies that literally have the greatest interaction.
Yeah.
So I'm a little concerned about that. I'm concerned about the relative nature of this sort of term as a carve out to doing this.
Yeah. Before we were talking about high impact service providers. I don't know if the consultants want to get that language back in here, Pam.
Yeah, I actually really take Bernard's point there. I think he's right. And I think that might be better language as high impact or
but that's a term of art, right? I mean, that is like,
yeah, no, it is. It's similar.
Some...
It could be, I guess it could be just as
Could I make a suggestion? Agencies come to mind that I think we drew on that were not high impact, you know, that particular named group. But could we maybe say just agencies interacting with the public? Get rid of the greatest. If you're interacting with the public, which it's going to be a lot of agencies, because we're not defining what interacting with the public means. But you know,
right? But like, does every agency presumably promulgates
notice and comment? I mean,
notice and like, so I don't. That's not what we're capturing. Agencies interacting with the public over services and access to programs, or is there something?
I'm thinking of like the Consumer Financial Protection Board. You know, they have a lot of interactions with the public, but they don't really, not in the way that.
Okay.
And I think they also have a customer service team, and that should be part of it.
Okay, let me call on Bernard and then Pam.
Oh.
Yes, so just briefly, maybe we can deal with this by relying on the agencies to figure this out. So add an as appropriate somewhere in here so that for agencies for which this is appropriate, they should be using consumer experience teams. For those for which they are not appropriate, they don't need to, and leave it up to them to kind of figure out what the need is.
Okay. So I think it would be sort of an alternative. So as appropriate, comma, agencies should have a team devoted to. So it's like an alternative to this interacting with the agencies. Let me call on Pam. Did you have a response? And then I'll call on Bill. No response? Okay. Bill, go ahead.
An alternative would be to say agencies should consider having a team devoted to improving customer experiences. In other words,
great.
That's another way of saying leaving it up to them. They should consider doing that. Then we say what they think should have, blah, blah, blah.
Great. And maybe that's one tick stronger than as appropriate. And maybe the people who were speaking in favor of the value of empowering consumer experience teams before, that might be better for them. Amy?
I think that I was just going to share a little bit more context from the report, which was that this was speaking both to agencies should have these customer experience teams, but it's also the agencies that have maybe one person who kind of has a little bit of duty over customer. It was this idea of like integrating customer experience into all aspects of the agency. So it's a little bit more than just having the teams. It's embedding the teams with, with a certain level of hierarchy within the agency. So
I think the subsequent sentences are trying to do that, especially 18, right? So
right. So I'm just in the terms of like agencies choosing whether or not it's appropriate for them to have a team. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm getting to where I want to get here.
Okay, Pam?
I don't know if I'm picking up on where Amy was going with this, but I think it's actually a little too soft to sort of say should consider. It was fairly, I mean, from my perspective, at least, that may not be what you guys were all comfortable with, at least from our perspective, this was a pretty central element. And I certainly understand that there might be some small agencies that this just doesn't work for, right? Like they're too small. But by and large, like the agencies we discussed in the report, by and large, the agencies I think that are referenced in the Customer Experience Act, like by and large, this kind of should be something our sense was this was pretty integral to really achieve kind of meaningful burden reduction. Certainly the evidence that we gathered from agencies which was that the agencies that were most successful at reducing burden had very strong functional customer service teams. So yeah, it feels just a little too soft to me, but I can understand why this group may not be comfortable with strong language.
Let me call on John and then Bridget.
I almost hate to raise this, but what about agencies that serve other federal agencies? Public Building Service, National Finance Center, Thrift Savings Board, do they create a customer experience team, or are we only dealing with the public externally? I'm just trying to get a sense of what the scope or focus might be.
So our report was only dealing external.
Okay. So never mind.
Okay, Bridget.
Yeah, and it's not I'm actually very supportive of CX teams and their role. I think that, and so I support strong language, nudging agencies to take this seriously and not just sort of have like one token person who knows what this stuff is. But the point that I'm trying to raise is that there are agencies other than the ones that you guys work through in the report. And so, that just makes me think that in either the CXEO or something from performance.gov or something, there's got to be some language that folks have figured out to draw a line here that isn't as restrictive as HISP, right? But isn't a free-for-all like agency. And so I would be inclined to like park this here and between time to see if we can't find how, say, the performance.gov team has tried to draw that line? Because they must get this question a million times when they issue guidance saying to do things on CX, and people say like, we don't have, this is not us, right? Right. So they must have had to draw this line.
So I'm going to then this is like one level above committee on style, but it's like ACUS further research on, and then committee on style will smooth this language over. I do think it's especially important for us to clarify what we mean here, because for sure, if we don't have something more restrictive on the floor, they will add as appropriate and it will pass. So whatever we kind of get here has to be probably a little more limited. And Bridget has given us, I think, a good path for how to do it. So let me call on Bill, although he just took his hand down, but let me call on Bill if he wants to say anything. And
Bridget said what I wanted to say.
Took your point. Okay, great. So let's go back to, I think we have a path for number 17. Let's go back to 18, not back, let's go on to 18. I'll give you a moment to read it and then I welcome comments. Okay, so let me call on John first to explain his suggestion that we use the word include, and then also, do we want to target other people beyond general counsels?
I just thought include would be a better word than incorporate, but the broader question I have is, what was the intent of the authors of this particular recommendation? Is that why is it focused only on general counsels when there's a range of players in the agencies that deal with CX type issues, like those that deal with the Paperwork Reduction Act, the agency risk officers, chief information officer. There's a whole range of other actors that need to be engaged. And in this particular recommendation, it's only engaging the general counsel. So that's my question.
Thanks, John. Pam, and then Bill.
Yeah, so we actually did. So I think maybe this just isn't coming out here. We absolutely talked about the customer experience being like a central organizing force that brought in a bunch of different actors within the agencies. So yes, but we had also separately pulled out general counsel, because one of the things that we found as we were talking to agencies was this issue about people getting far into the process, then they bring the lawyer in and the lawyer's like, you can't do that. And so it was really Amy who was sort of saying, if you bring these folks, if you're really actively sure that you're bringing in these folks from the start, they're going to like really help you think through how to do this in a way that navigates the statutory requirements and obligations and all that stuff. So yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we want to do it. We just need to figure out language for exactly who to talk about or have an including phrase. Bill?
Well, I agree. I don't like incorporate. I like involve better than include, but between includes okay as well. But I think it's important, as for the reasons that Pam pointed out, that this is called out as a particular issue, because it is a particular issue when we talk about trying to reduce burdens.
Bridget?
I agree. I like this recommendation, and I kind of wonder if there's another sort of quiet part here that we might play around with about encouraging agency attorneys to and we'll have to workshop this, but I'll just put my cards on the table. Sometimes the problem is agency lawyers, right, who are refusing to find discretion and saying, well, we can't do that. And it's either because we've never done it that way, or because my narrow read of the statute precludes this possibility. And so I just wonder if there's a quiet part here that we might want to lean into a little bit and try to find a way. And maybe ultimately we won't be comfortable with it, right? Maybe we decide that's not ACUS's role, but maybe trying to nudge towards finding discretion where it exists, rather than kind of defaulting to, nope, we've never done it that way, or this is how we've always done it posture. The get to yes lawyers, go find the get to yes lawyers, not the get to no lawyers.
Right. Amy.
I just want to ask Bridget if she was listening on all of our conversations over the past year, but also just to suggest that I think that's definitely the spirit in which this 18 is born from, to the extent that maybe I guess I had some language, but I'm kind of blanking out on it all of a sudden. Sorry, I'm gonna just mute myself. It's been 3 hours.
So let me suggest then that we use include. Let's just delete incorporate and use include. I'm going to suggest, because I'm just looking for language here, that we, instead of other legal officers, we find some higher degree of generality to capture those other institutional protections. I'm not really sure how to do that, but you know, I think maybe other legal officers is understood within the authority of general counsels. So the idea being that maybe we can specify general counsel, have some other including, and have, rather than having a separate recommendation that addresses the other people that John has spelled out. Okay, let me go back to Bill and then I'll go to Conway.
Well, I still think 18 should be limited to the legal people. But-
Okay. Maybe I misunderstood the thrust of where we're going. So you are suggesting a hard return and then a new 19.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about other people, I think you need a different thing because this is addressed at a different point.
Okay.
But to respond to the lawyers who say no and so forth, and having been one, I understand that perfectly. I wondered if you could just drop and that such efforts are consistent with legal authorities. Yeah, they'll do that anyway. Don't worry about that. And just leave it, understand the full range of legal options, which includes the limits, all right? But at least it makes it on the sort of more positive point than the negative point.
Yeah. So Conway?
Yes, I was wondering if maybe changing the language from understand the full range of legal options to something like address any legal barriers too, because I agree that the general counsels are usually the ones that are actually identifying ways not to do it rather than
Great.
to do it.
So address legal barriers to maximizing burden reduction. Thanks for that. Bill?
I think that's negative, all right? We want you to come in and tell us what the barriers are. No, we don't want you to tell us. We don't want you to tell us what the barriers are. We want you to tell us what the range of options are we can do. We want to be positive here. So I think if you say, come tell us what the barriers are, that's easy. I think that sends the wrong signal. Sorry.
I think probably Conway meant redress or something like that, remediate, work around or something. But now that you've said it, I see how you are seeing it. Conway, do you want to, withdraw?
No, I think general counsels are really good at identifying the legal barriers too, but by involving them earlier in the process, then hopefully you're, getting to a way to redress them. I don't know what.
So do we want to say that agencies are able to find ways to work around, or is that not soft enough? That's too heavy-handed. Yeah, we don't want to be urging them to push the barrier necessarily. Okay, before I go to Amy, just Bill, again, since you're sort of helping wordsmith this, and then I'll go to Amy.
Yeah, I still think you should go and leave it with sure that agencies understand the full range of legal options available. That's saying, help us out here.
Okay, let's go back to that then. I think that captures, Conway, what you're trying to get at. Okay. Amy.
I was just going to throw out there maximize and prioritize. I don't know if that prioritize was the word we used in our report. And I'm just that maybe if it's between finding discretion or saying no, kind of put a thumb on finding discretion, if that's possible. I don't know that.
Bernard has another word he wants to chime in on. Bernard. I can't hear you. I think, are you on mute?
Sorry, I forgot to take myself off mute. In order to facilitate what we're all trying to do, thinking that maybe we should say something like, so after, as early as possible, in order to, I would say, facilitate agency efforts to maximize and prioritize burden reduction. So that states it in a positive way. And then that's it.
Yeah. So that's, okay, so then you would delete agencies. Yeah, so you would facilitate agencies' efforts to maximize. Bill?
Well, I was not really gonna address Bernard's thing. I wanted to take out prioritize, because I prioritize over what? Prioritize over legal requirements? I mean, you're getting the lawyers there for what reason? You know?
Okay, so let's delete and prioritize. I hear you. And also, right, like if we had another, if this were another agenda that we also would support, we wouldn't want to, be pre-committing ourselves to sell this agenda over the other agenda that people, the next project that we might take up in this committee. So, okay, John?
Just quickly, instead of other legal officers, you could have possibly other agency stakeholders.
Yeah, and so other agency stakeholders, I'm wondering if that's too general to capture the specific people that you were calling out before. Is there some more precise language that captures that range of
people? Put it into the introduction, of course.
Right, the preamble could, yeah, no, I mean, like that's, you're laughing, but that's like a time-honored technique. Other institutional stakeholders, and then, so let's try that, other institutional stakeholders, and then let's, Ben, can you make a note that for the preamble, let's try to capture folks like in the list that John suggested in his
Would institutional stakeholders be seen by some as outside of government, though?
So that's kind of why my read sounds like outside of government. So I would like some other word.
Other agency stakeholders? Yeah, I don't know. Other internal stakeholders? I don't know.
Okay, let's do other internal stakeholders for now. That also then alleviates the need to add number 19, to add a number 19, which if we're, now that we've taken out the legal, the thrust of just the legal arena might make sense. Okay, are we satisfied with letting Committee on Style do the rest of 18, capturing this, including with some preamble language? Okay. 349. Ben, can you just scroll down and show us? It's 19. Oh, 19 is a long one. And it's this complicated thing. But at the same time, we need to get started because like already pushing a third meeting and we have a whole preamble, and this is a fabulous committee that has lots of ideas. So my proposal is that in the next 9 minutes, we try to get through at least the first 2 sentences of 19. So let's see where we are. Let's try to do that. So we also have these overarching goals that we're trying to discuss cumulative burdens across agencies in this section. And we had a goal of somewhere talking about agencies having shared definitions and documentation requirements. So let's take a look at these first 2 sentences, and then I know John has a substantive point to make about cross-agency priority goals is not quite the right way of framing this. So John, let me turn to you for your suggestion.
Cross-agency priority goals are overseen by OMB, and currently this administration has 3. And then there's 8, and they cover a 4-year span. And then there's agency priority goals, and there's about 85 of those, and they cover a 2-year span. And those are fairly narrow, so I would not necessarily link burden reduction to those. But
so we could just delete that phrase, is that right?
Yeah, I guess that could do it.
So we could just, after the sentence could just end after burden reduction.
Yes.
Okay, so let's try that. Ben?
And I think that fixes it.
Okay, great. Amy Bunk?
Sorry, I did unmute. I think, I guess reading this, my overall question was who's actually going to coordinate the collaboration is what jumped out at me because I'm not sure all agencies necessarily work with OIRA. I'm thinking about the independent agencies, or if we're coordinating, if we actually know that another agency is working in that same area or something they're doing is beneficial. You know, oh, we use this new software and we're doing this. How does that help DHS or FTC? And how do we link up to learn about that with?
So are the questions sort of leading towards a suggestion that OMB actually has to be involved? Big OMB, not OIRA?
Or maybe not OMB, but there should be somebody who's taking a lead at coordination.
Steph, are you on the call now? Do you have a view on how to handle this?
I am on the call and I'm sort of two minds. Like, I do think it can be helpful, and certainly we do this in the customer experience space with high impact service providers, but I'm reluctant to subject agencies to more OMB coordination or OMB to more agency coordination requirements. So if it's the sense of the committee and the agencies that this would be helpful, you know, I think we'd be amenable to it. But if I guess the question I have is really, is this something agencies do already? Is it something that they can do themselves? And I think the answer to that might be yes.
Let me hear from the consultants, because these come directly out of the findings. Pam or Amy Widman?
Yeah, I mean, the goal, so I'll just sort of step back and say, right, like the goal was, one of the big problems basically in terms of burden reduction is this issue about agencies sharing data, like this cross-agency sharing of data, because to do any kind of like automated enrollment or, you know, like a lot of the recommendations that we talked about earlier really does require this like cross-agency collaboration.
And is some of that driven internal by the agencies themselves? Like these data sharing agreements say, okay, well then I don't think, then it may be that that having it called out here with the report as support response to Amy Bunk's concern that how will this happen? It's sort of a call to agency leaders to understand and use as models other agencies that are making this happen. Is that one way of putting, Pam, what you're getting at?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, okay. I'm cautious because I'm really hearing people's concerns, right? Like I'm not like that's a good point.
Yeah,
so that seems reasonable, Eloise.
So let's just take a quick look at the second sentence and see if that helps support the first sentence. So agencies, program, and legal staff, this is in particular, should collaborate to seek ways to share data across federal agencies and between federal and state agencies. So we're not going to get to the bullet points here, but Amy Bunk, when you see this language and you hear Pam's response and you think about the report that would underlie it, and you hear Steph's comment about OMB and agencies sort of are already doing some of this or have the ability to, does that alleviate some of the concerns you have? Or you have another way of thinking about it?
Well, if I'm statutorily required to work with DOJ, then we're already working with them, or HHS, we're working with them, we're doing MOUs, we're trying to figure out how to data share. So I guess I'm still trying to figure out
where this would come from.
Where would this come from? And
what about this, that we already have in the recommendation a section on burden identification inside each agency? So if each agency has already identified, here are some burdens, how could we fix it? And some of the ways to fix it might be, oh, we could partner. So maybe like the previous recommendations is where that would come from. What do you think about that?
I'm still struggling a little, I guess.
Yeah,
And
okay. Okay, well,
because
you're
I think-
thinking, oh,
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just thinking that, you know, some Department of Transportation might have a really great idea. But because my agency doesn't interact with DOT, I wouldn't know that I could, that might be an idea that we could use.
So in other words, there needs to be some mechanism for knowing even where to turn to. Okay, let me go back to Steph.
I think, yeah, I had a similar comment. I guess that it seemed to me that the focus of this recommendation was on data sharing, in which case you've got to sort of figure out someone has the data and I need it and talk to them. But then there's like best practices and a forum for sharing best practices. And I think if we're talking about a forum for best practices, you know, maybe OMB could be helpful as a central coordinator, or ACUS could be helpful as a central coordinator, not to commit you all to anything,
Yeah.
but if we're
Okay.
talking about data sharing, I think maybe the focus on the agency is appropriate.
So I actually think there's three different ideas going on here. And Ben, I'm going to ask you to write these down. One is data sharing. The second is cumulative burden reduction. And the third is best practices. And I think that the ACUS team we need to do a little bit more writing to maybe disaggregate these things. Best practices in 21, Matthew is flagging for me. Okay, so we will come back to that. Okay, it's 3:58. I think we've done excellent work today. What we have left is figuring out how we're going to handle these three different things going on in this agency collaboration section. And then we have what I think of as the OMB section below. The ACUS staff and I are tasked with doing a little bit of some of the revising of things we've talked about before, with a little bit of coordination with Steph from OMB. So thank you for that. And we have our last meeting where we are going to finish these recommendations and work through the preamble. And we're going to finish that at the next meeting, which is in the date that I don't have in front of me, but that was previously circulated. Actually, I think it is Monday, November 6th from 1 to 4. The very last thing I'm going to say is that the less redrafting on the fly we can do and the more responding to pre-submitted comments, the better. So I love how active everybody is being inside the room, and it would be so great if folks could also really propose specific language, because we only have 3 hours. I know it's a long time, but we only have 3 hours to wrap all of this up. And so we really need to be working on specific language that actualizes ideas, not just, you know, it'll be easier to debate the ideas if we have specific language that we're looking at. So I'll just sort of urge and invite you to make specific comments ahead of time. So Ben, Matt, is there anything else we need to do to call us to a close? Maybe you can get out of screen share so we can all be in front of each other.
No, I think that's everything, Eloise. Thank you all so much for your work today, and I will be in touch soon, sharing the Zoom link for next week's meeting, as well as any revisions that we might want to circulate ahead of time.
Great. Thanks so much to everybody for excellent work today and before in pre-submitted comments. See you next time, and I'm looking forward to reading pre-submitted comments ahead of time. Bye.
Thanks, Eloise.